You know it's this. Take a perk and a talk of this shit. Money swollen like sis. They done perfected the kid. Got a billion who sank on my head. Nothing better. Pull out the rope I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 12th part of What If Deku Meets Powerpuff Girls. Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of ChiWriters on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Saturday afternoon. Alright, girls. Nizu's voice echoed through the speakers. As always, you are free to display the level of strength of your abilities, but please do keep in mind to not go overboard. Do I make myself clear? Back at UA, the girls were stationed in a high-tech training ground, specially designed for advanced students and teachers to improve their stamina and strength. The gym resembled a standard training space, equipped with various gym equipment, but it also featured reinforced concrete walls, bulletproof glass windows high above, and hidden panels embedded in the walls. These panels could shift, revealing surprises and unpredictable challenges to push the students to their limits. Nizu had advised the girls to use the facility for their serious training ever since they arrived in this world. With the school having a steady flow of funds, Nizu had no issues allowing them free rein to showcase their powers, though he did warn them to hold back just a little, not knowing the extent of their abilities. Right. The trio responded in unison, their voices brimming with confidence. Good begin. Nizu announced, and the speakers retracted into the wall with a soft click. The girls stood facing each other in a triangular formation, eyes closed, barely moving. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, and the stillness hung in the air for what felt like an eternity. Then, in an instant, their eyes snapped open, glowing with intense energy before quickly fading. Blossom, unlike her usual strategies, took the initiative and quickly slammed her palms together, her energy flowing between until she separated them and out came 5 energy discs floating in front of her. Get ready, girls. Was the only warning before she backed up and shot the discs outwards, aiming at her 2 sisters. Both sisters were on guard. Bubbles went on the defensive and quickly resurrected her force field, blocking 2 of the attacks. Buttercup went with a more heads-on approach. She took the 3 remaining attacks at face value, lighting fast reflexes. She punches all 3 energy discs, even as they exploded in her face. Nice try, Red, Buttercup said with a smirk, casually dusting herself off as if the attacks were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Now, let's see if you can handle this. This time, her body glowed in her own energy and without missing a beat, charged after her sister at great speed. Blossom did not flinch. She stood at her spot, and just when Buttercup was well in reach to land a punch, Blossom, in her own show of her reflexes and speed, sidestepped the attack, allowing Buttercup to miss by a hair, crush landing her fist into the wall. Coward! Buttercup growled out. But Blossom just smirked at that. Just then, she turned just in time to see a flurry of blue spheres launched at her. She immediately flew out of the way. Just in time it collided on the spot she once was and detonated into a ripple of sonic sound waves. Blossom, now high above the floor, quickly looked around. Where did she dash, but was cut off when she was knocked back by Sonic Scream. Blossom's body was sent flying back by the powerful shockwave of Bubbles' Sonic Scream. Her back slammed into the reinforced wall, leaving cracked spiderwebbing across the surface as she slid to the ground. Dazed for only a moment, she quickly pushed herself to her feet, her eyes flashing pink as she readied herself for another strike. She couldn't let her guard down for a second, not with her sisters pushing their limits like this. That all you got, Bubbles? Blossom called out, already back on the offensive, her body flickering with a pink aura as she coated her hands for the next attack. With a snap of her fingers, she effortlessly tore chunks of the floor free, raised them in the air and hurled them at Bubbles in a flurry of debris. The pieces flew through the air like missiles, each one aimed with precision, but Bubbles was quick to react. Not quite. With a grunt, Bubbles raised her arms, her aura flaring around her as she released another devastating array of sonospheres. The energy from the spheres collided with the incoming projectiles, shattering them in mid-air with a deafening boom. Dust and rubble filled the air, and Bubbles' blue glow intensified as she launched herself into the fray, moving with a fluid grace despite the chaos surrounding her. Buttercup, not wanting to be outdone, charged in once again, her body glowing with bright green plasma. She barreled forward, launching plasma blasts from her hands, each one sizzling through the air like bolts of lightning. She aimed for Blossom, but the older sister was ready. Blossom took a deep breath and exhaled, unleashing a heavy ice breath that quickly formed a big enough barrier, that although shattered, blocked the first wave, but Buttercup was relentless, charging through with a series of rapid punches, each one crackling with energy and leaving fiery trails in its wake. Blossom did her best to dodge or block each one of the plasma punches, her mind already calculating her next move. In a fluid motion, she managed to grab hold of Buttercup's wrist mid-punch and yanked her off balance, sending the middle sister crashing into the floor. The impact sent shockwaves rippling through the arena, and the floor cracked beneath them. "Not today, Buttercup." Blossom taunted, her confidence rising as she hovered above, ready to strike again. But before she could act, Bubbles was there, her body glowing with intense energy. With a fierce cry, she lunged forward, launching a flurry of powerful punches aimed directly at Blossom. Each blow came with a burst of force, the sound of her fists slicing through the air like thunderclaps. The air vibrated with the intensity of her assault as she attacked with pinpoint precision. Blossom barely had time to react as Bubbles' fist collided with her, sending a shock of pain through her chest, knocking the wind out of her lungs. Although they were all a lot tougher to bruise, it still hurt nonetheless. Blossom staggered but quickly recovered, summoning more of her telekinetic energy to shield herself, her hands glowing with a fierce pink light. She moved her palms forward, pushing back against Bubbles' relentless assault. "You're really pushing it, Bubbles," she shouted, frustration lacing her voice as she gathered her focus, preparing for the next strike. The walls around them groaned, and deep cracks appeared as the sisters continued their onslaught. Their attacks were vicious, relentless, and the air hummed with raw power. Buttercup, now back on her feet, let out a battle cry as she charged again, her plasma energy raging like a storm. She collided with Blossom with a ferocity that sent shockwaves through the training facility, both sisters locked in a fierce struggle as their powers collided, sending arcs of energy into every direction. Bubbles, seeing her chance, extended her hands, and a massive sonic pulse erupted from her, sweeping across the entire battlefield. The wave of energy tore through the arena, blasting chunks of the floor into the air and knocking both of her sisters off balance. The explosion of sound echoed through the facility, the vibrations too intense to ignore. The girls were standing on the edge, pushing themselves to their limits. The air around them was thick with tension, and the damage to the training room was catastrophic. Dust filled the air, and the walls were battered, showing signs of imminent collapse. Each sister was breathing heavily, their energy reserves thinning, but their longing to dominate and prove their strength kept them going. Buttercup wiped a bit of sweat from her brow, grinning fiercely despite the exhaustion. "You've got some fight in you, ladies. But let's see how long you can last." She exploded into action again, launching herself toward Blossom with a flurry of strengthened punches, but Blossom kept up her defense, barely fazed by the heat given off. She blocked, countered, and redirected, her speed and control on full display. "Not yet, Buttercup," Blossom muttered, her eyes glowing bright with intensity as she summoned a massive wave of psychokinetic energy. She unleashed it with a devastating force, sending her sisters flying backward. The impact of the blast shook the entire building, and the force of the energy left a crater where Blossom had stood moments before. Bubbles, struggling to regain her footing, glared at her sisters. "This isn't over yet." She rushed forward with a fierce expression, her aura surging as she prepared for the next attack, shapes forming around her. Blossom's aura blazed out, "Bring it!" and charged forward. Buttercup eyes glowed fiercely as she bared her teeth, "Now we're talking." But just as the girls were about to really let loose. "Enough, girls," Nizu's voice echoed, firm but patient. "Training is over. Thank you. You may rest now." For a brief moment, the world stood still. The tension in the air dissipated as the three sisters slowly lowered their fists, their glowing eyes dimming. Panting heavily, Blossom, Buttercup, and Bubbles stood, their bodies humming with the unreleased energy, sweat dripping down their faces. The room around them was utterly destroyed, walls cracked, the floor torn apart, debris scattered everywhere. Blossom took a deep breath, trying to steady her growing powers. "I really let loose this time," she muttered, looking around at the destruction with a look of embarrassment. Buttercup grinned, looking at the ruins with pride. "Yeah. That was fun," she said, wiping a bit of dust from her cheek. "Maybe we should do this more often." Blossom gave her a withering look, as if reminding her to pull it back. Bubbles took a longer time to steady her emotions, sighing, her shoulders sagged in exhaustion. "I think we all might have needed that," she took a glance and continued, "but I hope Nizu doesn't mind the mess." It had been 2 weeks since Bubbles' encounter with him at the mall, and the girls were growing more anxious by the day. Although only Bubbles was the only one to have the memory of Creep's presence, but coupled with the possibility that he could be working with the guy, Shigaraki, kept them all on high alert, making their powers flare up in unpredictable ways. Despite their best efforts to stay composed, even Blossom, usually the most controlled, found her abilities acting out of her grasp. The weight of the situation was wearing on them. Every day, the thought of him and Shigaraki gnawed at their nerves, and the girls grew increasingly tense and on edge. Though they didn't know much about the Shigaraki guy, they weren't willing to take any chances. The uncertainty surrounding him's plans and the potential threat of this unknown figure pushed them to prepare for anything. Rather than letting their powers spiral out of control, they became determined to channel their anxiety into training. Eager to stay ready for whatever him had in store for them, they sought an outlet in their training sessions. They sought the permission of Principal Nizu and he agreed to host them in one of the school's less used but more advanced gyms. Restless and driven, the girls threw themselves into the gym, a place where they could safely release their energy and find balance. For the past 2 weeks, they had been training there twice a week, using the sessions not just to hone their skills, but to regain control over their powers and emotions. It became their way of confronting their fears, preparing for whatever the future might hold. Buttercup shrugged, "Nah, I'm sure Mr. Ratman has some funds lying around to help with the mess." Just then, the voice of their chimera principal, Nizu, came in. "Well, I wouldn't say I have an endless supply of funds, Buttercup," Nizu replied, as he strode through the door of the gym. He looked around the room with a hum, his eyes scanning the damage. "Oh my. You know, girls, if most of the students could work even a fraction as hard as you did today, I would say that we wouldn't have a shortage of future heroes," he chuckled lightly. Buttercup gave a half smirk, her arms crossed over her chest. "Well, Nizu, if you had more students like us, you might need a bigger gym. Or at least one with sturdier walls." Her eyes glowed with the after-effects of her energy. Blossom sighed, her tone even but firm. "Buttercup, cool it." She didn't raise her voice, but the calm authority in her tone made it clear she wasn't backing down. Buttercup shot her a glare, her fists still clenched, but after a moment, she relaxed her posture and muttered, "Fine." Bubbles, sensing the tension was still thick in the air, decided to speak up. "Thanks again, Mr. Nizu, for allowing us to train here for the time being," she said, her voice soft but sincere. Nizu shook his head, a gentle smile forming on his face. "It is quite all right, my dear. I know that the incident a few weeks back has shaken not just you, but other students as well. So I am glad that you are not allowing it to overtake you and train for the future with reason, of course." His voice was calm, understanding, but there was a weight behind his words that made it clear he was aware of the situation's gravity but still would rather they not think to be reckless. Bubbles lowered her head, guilt creeping into her expression. I wish I had done something, she murmured quietly, her voice tinged with self-doubt. Blossom placed a hand on her sister's shoulder, her touch light but reassuring. Bubbles, it's like I said before, you didn't know what him was planning. The fact that he was in an enclosed area like the mall made it a risky situation for any of us. Her tone was gentle, trying to ease Bubbles' guilt. Buttercup scoffed, rolling her eyes. Maybe for you, Red, but I was ready to face that creep. She crossed her arms defiantly, the energy still pulsing in her. Blossom shot her a sharp glare. Oh really, Buttercup? What could you have possibly done without causing destruction to the entire mall and getting us in trouble? Buttercup shot back, her voice tinged with frustration. Maybe actually capture that clown instead of letting him get away. The word struck a nerve, and Bubbles flinched, her heart aching at the suggestion. Blossom's gaze hardened as she turned to Buttercup. Buttercup. You honestly wouldn't have even kept your temper in check around him, much less capture him. A dangerous spark flickered in Buttercup's eyes. Her aura flared around her, crackling with energy. Oh yeah. Fine. But that's why we're training. To really show that F-creep who's boss. Her. Words came out in a burst of fiery frustration. Her power surged, and the air around her crackled with intensity. Blossom's voice dropped, pressing, trying to keep control. Buttercup, calm down. But Buttercup's eyes still glowed fiercely, her aura a dangerous storm. It took a few minutes before the energy began to subside, her glowing eyes dimming and her aura finally settling. She slumped down, scowling, and looked around at the faces watching her. With a sharp scoff, she stood and turned toward the door. I'm leaving. Her voice was tight, almost strained with emotion. Bubbles called after her, her voice soft, Buttercup, wait. But Buttercup didn't listen. She didn't even slow down. The door slammed shut behind her, the sound echoing in the room, leaving the two sisters in silence. Blossom sighed deeply, her shoulders sagging as the weight of the moment settled over her. She turned to Nizu, her eyes filled with a sense of apology. I'm sorry for what you just saw, she said quietly, her voice tinged with regret for the tension in the room. Buttercup's been on edge lately, and... It's no problem, Blossom. Nizu's expression remained calm, unruffled. From what you girls have told me about him, he sounds to be quite nerve-shaking, to say the least. I can imagine why you would all be on edge. He said this, though his gaze grew thoughtful for a moment. Blossom and Bubbles exchanged a glance before slowly turning their eyes toward the door where Buttercup had just stormed out. The silence that fell between them was heavy, thick with unspoken thoughts. They understood where Buttercup was coming from, even if she wouldn't admit it. Him and his schemes could be terrifying, but they didn't want their fears to get the better of them. Who knew what trouble that could cause? Bubbles broke the silence, her voice soft. Blossom, I think we should talk to her. Blossom nodded, her expression weary. You're right, Bubbles. She sighed. Then, turning her focus back to Nizu, she spoke again, giving a small bow. Principal Nizu, thank you for allowing us to train here, and we hope we didn't cause you too much trouble, she said, gesturing to the mess around the room. Nizu shook his head with a smile. Not at all, girls. That's why you're here at UA, to better yourself as heroes. As for the damages, it can't be helped. Some wear and tear comes with quirk training. Anyway, please go tend to your sister, and I wish you a safe trip on Monday. Blossom offered him a grateful nod before turning toward the door, her mind already focused on finding Buttercup. With a final glance at Bubbles, the two of them left the gym. Hallway. Buttercup was pacing restlessly in the hallway, her energy surging, crackling around her. Her eyes glowed brightly, a visible reminder of the tension she was trying to contain. Though her anger was still simmering, it wasn't directed at her sisters. No, this was something else. She was worried, and that was something she rarely allowed herself to feel. Ever since the mall incident, her mind kept drifting to a certain green-haired boy. Izuku. The fact that he had come face to face with one of him's new lackeys had left a deep mark on her. It made her blood boil, made her question if there was more she could have done to help. She had been ready to fight, but she was not given the chance. And now, the feeling of inadequacy gnawed at her, leaving her torn between wanting to check on Izuku and feeling embarrassed for not acting sooner. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever as she tried to rein in the storm inside her. She could feel her powers threatening to break loose again. With a frustrated sigh, she muttered under her breath, "Boy, when did I get so lame?" "I wouldn't say you're lame for caring about a friend." Buttercup jumped at the sudden voice. She quickly turned to see Bubbles, leaning against the wall with a knowing look on her face. "What are you talking about?" "I ain't worried about anyone." Buttercup shot back defensively, her tone harsh as she tried to put up a wall. She didn't want to admit it, not to Bubbles, not to anyone. Bubbles raised an eyebrow, unfazed by her sister's deflection. "What are you doing here? Came to judge me just like Blossom? And where's Little Miss Perfect?" Buttercup huffed, not able to keep the edge of her frustration out of her voice. "Blossom went to grab our bags. I decided to talk to you first," Bubbles said, her expression softening. She paused for a moment before a teasing smirk tugged at her lips. "Buttercup, you should know by now, even without my powers, the fact that you were so worried about Izuku after the whole incident, it spoke volumes." Buttercup immediately scoffed, trying to brush it off. "What are you talking about? I was just—" Bubbles cut her off gently, still smirking but with a glimmer of understanding in her eyes. "You don't have to hide it, Buttercup. It's okay to care. We all understand. Him and his minions, that was a surprise, and I normally like surprises but not that one," she said in a pout tone. "But you don't have to be worried alone." Buttercup froze, her deflective attitude faltering under Bubbles' kind, unwavering gaze. Her shoulders sagged slightly, and for a moment, she wanted to argue, wanted to deny everything. But seeing the genuine concern in Bubbles' eyes made something inside her soften. I didn't know what to do," Buttercup muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. The weight of her guilt made her chest tighten. "I should have been there for him. I should have helped. Hey, he's okay in the end. That much is so." Bubbles stepped closer, offering a small, reassuring smile. "We all do what we can, and sometimes that means we just need to be there when it counts. You're not alone in this." Buttercup's gaze softened as she let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. For a moment, she said nothing, just letting the words sink in. Then, she muttered a quiet apology. "I'm sorry, Bubbles," she said, the words heavy but sincere, her shoulders slumping as the pressure inside her slowly started to dissipate. Bubbles smiled warmly. "No problem, oh, I almost forgot, let me try this," and, with a small hum, lightly activated her powers. She tilted her head, her blue eyes sparkling as she began to sing a soft, calming tune. As her voice rang out, a gentle aura surrounded them, and musical note projections materialized, flying around the two sisters. The notes floated in the air, popping softly one by one, releasing a soothing, calming melody. Buttercup could feel the tension within her starting to loosen, her aura beginning to settle. She hadn't even realized how tight her body had been until the music's effects started to work its magic. Her glowing eyes gradually dimmed, and she felt the storm within her quieting, even if just a little. Bubbles, seeing the effect it had on her sister, felt a sense of peace wash over her as well. It was always comforting to know her powers could help, especially when it was for someone she cared about. "There. I always forget that I can do that," she giggled at her forgetfulness. "Welp, not really a power that you can use to clobber a guy, but it's still good," she said dismissively before continuing. "Thanks, Bubbles," Buttercup murmured, her voice softer now. The tightness in her chest had loosened, her usual brashness replaced by a more vulnerable tone. "I'm sorry for being such an but." Bubbles didn't hesitate. She immediately wrapped her arms around her sister in a hug, holding her tightly. Buttercup stiffened at first, clearly not used to such affection, but after a brief moment, she relented. With a soft sigh, she returned the hug, her arms slowly wrapping around Bubbles. Bubbles pulled back slightly, grinning. "You don't have to thank me. We're sisters. We've got each other's backs." Buttercup gave her a small, almost reluctant smile. Yeah, just don't expect me to get all mushy or anything." Bubbles laughed lightly, the mood lightening between them. "I won't. But just remember, you don't have to do everything alone." Buttercup sighed, the weight seeming to lighten, if not a little. Just then, Blossom came running in, bags floating behind her, compliments of her powers. She called out to her sisters as she skidded to a halt in front of them. "Geez, guys, I know I'm the leader, but it doesn't mean I'm responsible for your stuff," she said in a light, playful tone. Bubbles giggled and reached up to grab her bag from the air. "Thanks, Blossom," she chimed brightly. Blossom smiled at her younger sister before turning her attention to Buttercup, who was deliberately avoiding eye contact, clearly not wanting to be lectured or feeling the faint twinge of guilt from her earlier outburst. The silence hung between them, and Bubbles, sensing the tension, decided to take matters into her own hands. She nudged Buttercup lightly with her elbow, much to the latter's annoyance. "Come on, Buttercup. You know you're gonna have to talk to her sooner or later," Bubbles said, grinning. Buttercup let out an exaggerated sigh but finally gave in. "Look, Blossom, I'm sorry for how I acted." Blossom, her hands on her peach, cut her off with a soft smile. "As your leader and older sister." "Leader because of that bow and older by barely a few seconds," Buttercup retorted with a smirk. Blossom rolled her eyes playfully but maintained her calm. "Be that as it may, I'm the one in the position. I should have tried to talk to you about your feelings and see where we could go from there. And although your attitude isn't always pleasant, it warrants a sisterly talk and such." Buttercup chuckled and shot a sideways glance at her sister. "Wow, Blossom, did you get that from a greeting card or something?" she teased. Blossom raised an eyebrow, her expression not changing. "You know, Buttercup, you can be a real pain sometimes." Buttercup groaned and rubbed the back of her neck, slightly uncomfortable but relenting. Fine. I'll try to be less grouchy and talk about my feelings more even though it seems stupid," she muttered the last part, barely above a whisper. Blossom's smile softened, and she gently floated Buttercup's bag over to her. "It's not stupid. It's okay to let people in sometimes," she said quietly, her tone filled with a rare warmth. Buttercup gave a slight grunt in response but didn't argue. She swung the strap of her backpack over her shoulder and gave Blossom a playful glare. "Alright, tough girl, let's go get some ice cream." Her voice turned dry but amused. "Your treat," Blossom smirked. Before Buttercup could respond, Bubbles perked up and squealed, "Yay! Buttercup is buying us ice cream. And I know just the place." She dashed ahead, practically skipping down the hall, leaving her sisters behind. Buttercup groaned, throwing her hands up in the air. "You know, I'm going to get you for this, right?" she pointedly said at the older sister. Blossom just shrugged, sticking her tongue out in a playful challenge. "Yeah, but it still got a smile out of you." Buttercup didn't reply right away. Instead, she adjusted the strap of her backpack and allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile to tug at the corners of her lips. Without a word, she started walking down the corridor, Blossom following close behind. "Come on, slowpokes." Bubbles' voice called from the distance, her excitement contagious. The three sisters walked side by side, the hallway filled with the sound of Bubbles' excited footsteps ahead and the quiet rhythm of Buttercup and Blossom following behind. The tension from earlier had melted away, replaced by a comfortable silence that spoke volumes. Buttercup glanced at Blossom, who was still smiling softly, and then at Bubbles, her infectious energy lighting up the hall. Despite the chaos, the teasing, and the occasional friction, the girls weren't alone in this little debacle, for they had each other to knock some senses into. But even as she allowed herself to enjoy the moment, her thoughts briefly flickered back to Izuku. The worry still lingered, just beneath the surface, but for now, she decided it didn't matter. She could handle it later. Right now, there was only one thing on her mind: ice cream with her sisters. With a smirk that only Buttercup could muster, she silently wished him good luck for the butt whooping that the Powerpuff Girls were soon going to deliver him. And as they stepped outside into the cool afternoon, Buttercup allowed herself a moment to enjoy the simple pleasure of being with family, because sometimes, that was enough to calm the storms. Outside gates of UA. On the first day of summer break, the Hero Course students gathered excitedly for their much-anticipated training camp. They assembled in the morning, all dressed in their school uniforms, and soon made their way to the 2 buses awaiting them. "Oh, I am so excited for this trip, Deku!" Uraraka exclaimed, practically bouncing beside him. Izuku slightly flinched but replied, "Yeah. It's sure be a great experience," trying to match her energy. Kaminari, just a little ahead of them, shared his own excitement. "You know it, buddy. Camp. Camp. Camp." He started chanting, and Mina, not too far behind, joined in with equal energy. "Camp. Camp. Camp." Their enthusiasm was contagious, and most of Class 1A was caught up in the excitement. However, not everyone was sharing the same level of enthusiasm at such an early hour. "Ugh, I swear, I'm going to knock those 2 out, if they don't quiet down," Buttercup grumbled, clearly not a morning person. Blossom, standing beside her with a calm smile, gave a teasing look. "Should have gone to bed earlier when I told you, huh?" That earned Blossom a glare from her raven-haired sister, but she didn't back down. Tsu, who was standing nearby, caught the exchange and, with her usual bluntness, asked, "You're definitely not a morning person, are you, Buttercup?" She croaked slightly, a finger thoughtfully resting on her cheek. "No kidding, Tsu," Buttercup yawned widely and rubbed her eyes. "And I ain't the only normal sister who isn't too," she said, pointing a finger at her sister, who was now smirking at her. Bubbles, also clearly not a morning person, was leaning sleepily against a blushing Koda. Her eyes were barely open as she dozed off in the quiet of the early morning, though Koda's didn't look uncomfortable. There were a few others who looked unimpressed by the early wake-up call, while some of the students seemed to be doing better. Tsu nodded with understanding. "Well, if you'd like, you could rest a bit on the bus, next to me," she offered. "Thanks, Tsu," Buttercup replied gratefully. Now I just need to block out any more annoying." Before she could finish her sentence, a familiar, obnoxious voice rang out across the courtyard. "What? I heard some of Class A students are getting extra lessons. Does that mean some of them failed the final exam?" Monoma's voice echoed with mock surprise as he dramatically ran his hand through his blonde hair. "Seriously? How weird is that? Must be so embarrassing," he continued, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Especially since everyone knows Class A is supposed to be so superior to Class B, but now this? Wow, all of you must be so." Buttercup, hearing his voice, was ready to shut him up herself until. Whack! Kendo, the Class 1B representative, swiftly chopped Monoma on the neck, sending him tumbling to the ground in a heap. "Sorry, don't worry about him," she apologized to Class 1A with a soft smile. Using her quirk, Kendo grew her right hand to an enormous size and effortlessly lifted Monoma in one hand while her left grabbed his suitcase. "And you, just get on the bus and shut up." She nearly shoved him onto the Class 1B bus, silencing him for the moment. Some of Class 1A just stared dumbly at the scene. "Monoma is scary," Yanagi Reiko, a soft-spoken girl from Class 1B, muttered, her arms crossed in front of her, displaying a low-energy demeanor, even in this situation. Izuku, always the friendly one, turned toward them with a bright smile. "Oh, the rest of Class B," he said, offering a friendly greeting. Tokage Setsuna, a mischievous girl from Class 1B with long green hair, grinned back at Izuku. "Ignore Monoma," she laughed. "He's got some weird complex. She added, with a playful smirk, but I must say, it's interesting to see you all outside of the sports festival. She was clearly eyeing a certain red-haired person in Class 1A, a flirtatious glint in her eye. Some more than others. MHA, another student from Class 1B, nodded coolly in acknowledgement but didn't engage much beyond that. Wu, Kaminari, not missing a beat, whistled lowly. Are all the girls in the hero course cute on purpose? He asked Siro, who only rolled his eyes in response. Kirishima, noticing Tokeiichi's gaze on him, became visibly flustered and scratched the back of his neck awkwardly. Blossom, observing this from the sidelines, couldn't help but roll her eyes. But she put it aside and stepped forward to greet them. Glad to be working with you as well, Blossom said, with Momo by her side as the Class 1A representatives. A few polite greetings were exchanged between the classes before everyone began boarding the buses assigned to their respective groups. Everyone, Class 1A's bus is over here. Blossom called, waving the students over to the large vehicle. Please, be careful when boarding. A few minutes later, Aizawa entered the scene, his usual tired expression on display. He glanced over the students with a quick head count, his eyes briefly meeting Blossom and Momo's. When the students nodded in understanding, Aizawa took his seat at the front of the bus, and it began to move, the sound of engines humming in the background. The long ride to the training camp had officially begun. On the highway. Alright, here's the deal. We'll be stopping in about an hour, he said, his voice low and serious. Until then, make sure you stay focused. Aizawa briefly said, looking back to make sure the students understood, only to get less than ideal behavior from them and a little more rambunctious teens being teens. Let's blast some music. Something summary. Some tube songs, anyone? Kaminari grinned at Kirishima who had his phone out. Seats are meant to be sat in. Sit down, everyone. Ida stood up to remind the other students that were standing up. Ida? Jiro mentioned, looking at him blankly. Way to lead by example, Ida. Bubbles laughed while Ida quickly sat down, embarrassed by his own rule-breaking in his attempt to instill order. Aizawa gave a blank expression upon seeing the students' antics and turned back to face the front. Well, this is their last chance to have some fun for a while, he thought, partially blocking out the noise from his students. The training they had planned would be anything but fun. After some time had passed, Blossom, who was sitting at the back of the bus next to a quiet shoji, reading a book she wasn't one to get car sick, looked over at her classmates, scanning the scene. The bus had finally quieted down, with some of the students busy on their phones, while others were taking the opportunity to catch up on sleep before they reached their destination. Her sisters were no different. Buttercup had taken the seat next to Tsu, her head resting against the window, while Tsu chatted with Uraraka, sitting in the row ahead of them. Bubbles was, unsurprisingly, sitting next to Koda, her head gently resting on his arm while he leaned back in his seat. Blossom couldn't help but smile at the peaceful scene. Always glad for moments of peace like this, she thought to herself, content with the calm, not feeling the need to sleep herself. Hey, Blossom, you good? Kirishima's voice broke through her thoughts. She turned to see him standing beside her, freshly returned from the bathroom, his hands still damp from washing. Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for asking, Kirishima, she replied with a reassuring tone. Oh, that's great to hear, he trailed off, falling into a short silence. Anyway, just wanted to say hi while I was up. See you, he said quickly, before making his way to the front of the bus, where his seat was. Blossom didn't think she looked worried, but she smiled nonetheless, watching him head off. With a small shrug, she returned to her book, content with the quiet of the ride. 1 hour later. The bus bounced over the dirt road, jolting most of the students awake as they groggily rubbed their eyes and sat up. Bubbles stirred in her seat, stretching and popping her neck before looking out the window to see they were stopping at a large embankment overlooking a vast forest. Wow, are we already here? She asked, her voice still a little groggy. Tenya, looking out the window as well, noticed the lack of buildings nearby and furrowed his brow. Is there a problem with the bus? Perhaps the engine has overheated, and they must let it sit idle to cool down. It's just a rest stop, so shut it, Aizawa grunted, standing up. We have 5 minutes to spare, so get up and stretch your legs. As everyone began to stir, Bubbles was getting ready to leave when she noticed that Koda had a nervous look on his face. And instantly had an idea of what it meant. The bus had stopped at a roadside lookout point, offering a panoramic view of a sprawling forest that spread across the valleys, hills, and mountains in the distance. However, there didn't seem to be any facilities nearby, and only one other car was parked at the spot. As the students got off the bus, some stretched to loosen up their muscles, while others were just glad to be out of the cramped seats. The last two to get off were Blossom and Momo, who made sure that everyone had gotten off and that everything was in order. Feeling the cool breeze against her face, Uraraka couldn't help but smile, stretching her arms out to the sides as her shoulders popped. Oh, that feels better now, she sighed in relief. Tell me about it. I feel like my butt is still asleep, Mina groaned, rubbing her back as if to ease the stiffness. What kind of a rest stop is this? Shoji asked, glancing around and noting the lack of facilities. Right? And where's Class B? Toru added, looking around for the second bus, but it was nowhere to be found. Aizawa, as if expecting the confusion, spoke up. Of course, we stopped here for a reason. He walked toward the lone car, and the doors of the vehicle opened. Heya, Eraser, a woman's voice greeted Aizawa. Sorry, haven't seen you in a while, Aizawa responded with a short bow as two women stepped out of the car. Your feline fantasies are here. Rock on with these. Sparkling gazes, the first woman declared with enthusiasm. Stunningly cute and cat-like girls, the second woman followed, striking a pose. You can call us the wild pussycats. Both women exclaimed in unison, striking dramatic poses. The students stared blankly at the two pro-heroes, who seemed more interested in posing than providing any kind of useful information. Their costumes were quite similar too, sleeveless, collared tops decorated with 3 straps and a bell, a large ruffled skirt, tails, an orange belt with pockets, and gloves with retractable claws. The blonde woman wore a blue version of the costume, while the brunette wore a red one. Their look was finished with boots lined with white fur and communication devices designed to resemble cat ears. Behind the two women stood a young boy, likely in elementary school, wearing a simple short-sleeved shirt and shorts. His red baseball cap, adorned with 2 metal spikes poking out from the front, gave him a slightly mischievous look. However, his face clearly showed he wasn't thrilled to be here at all. These are the pro-heroes who'll be helping us out this time, Aizawa explained, his voice flat. The pussycats. Kitties. Bubbles shouted excitedly, causing the others to blink in confusion. The girls, for their own reasons, seemed puzzled by the team's name. Buttercup raised an eyebrow. The Wild Wa. The Pussycats. Mandalay and Pixie Bob. Izuku eagerly cut in, his eyes lighting up with excitement. Oh my gosh! The Wild Pussycats. They're a 4-person hero team working under a single agency, and they specialize in mountain rescue operations. The Pussycats were founded when we were kids like, forever ago. Izuku continued, almost too excited to contain himself. Not realizing a certain someone was approaching him, this marks their 12th year working as. I'm pretty sure your math is off. Izuku gasped suddenly, his voice filled with disbelief as Pixie Bob's paw latched onto his face. She grinned, her smile turning maniacal. Been around for what? I'm 18 at heart, she quipped, holding Izuku's face as though it were a toy. 18. Understood, Izuku whimpered, clearly uncomfortable as her claws scraped lightly across his face before she released him. Many students just sweat dropped at the sad, almost painful display of the woman's enthusiasm to change her age. Pixie Bob, noticing something off in the corner of her eye, gave a mischievous grin. She had spotted Koda, who was attempting and failing to hide behind Bubbles. The latter was knowledgeable to Kota's discomfort and kept guard. Aizawa, clearly unimpressed, grunted as Izuku panted out in relief, then turned to the rest of the class. As they said, these are the wild pussycats. They'll be helping us during this training camp. Mandalay nodded, turning toward the forest. This entire mountain is our property. If you make it through the forest to our cabin, you'll have lunch waiting for you. But anyone who doesn't make it by noon won't get to eat. So far away. Half of the class exclaimed in unison. Wait, then why did we stop halfway? Ochako asked, her stomach dropping at the thought of a longer hike. I think we already know the answer to that. Sue's face paled as a theory came to her mind. Let's get back to the bus. Siro suggested, slowly backing toward the vehicle, trying not to draw attention. It's now 9:30 a.m., Mandalay continued with a playful grin, her tail swishing behind her. You have until noon at the earliest to get to the cabin. Ah, DMN, Kaminari muttered, feeling his stomach drop. No way, Kirishima groaned, his expression falling as the reality of the situation set in. Run! Mina suddenly shouted as she bolted toward the bus. Back to the bus, quick! Shoji called, following the others as they rushed to get back on. Kiddies who don't make it there by 12:30 won't get any lunch. Mandalay added with a grin, relishing the panic she had caused. There is no slacking now, Aizawa called out, as Pixie Bob's paws reached for the road. The ground began rumbling underneath the blonde pro, vibrating just before the entire road ripped apart and turned into a massive wave of dirt rushing towards them. Aha! The teens cried out as the dirt beneath them rose up in a huge wave and threw them over the edge of the cliff before they could react. Your summer training camp starts now. Aizawa's voice cut through the chaos as the students, along with the mass of dirt, disappeared over the edge. The others stood frozen for a moment, staring at the scene. Bubbles sighed in relief, her voice coming from above. That was a close one. I almost got my clothes dirty. The pro heroes looked up. I must say, it pays to be on high alert, Blossom's voice came, steady as always. Buttercup peered down at the students, then the pros, a small smirk forming. Nice try, lady, she called out to Pixie Bob, who had been the one to create the wave of dirt that had nearly thrown them off the cliff. The pussycats were watching in shock, clearly not expecting 3 students to be floating effortlessly in the air, dodging the surprise attack. The girls were surrounded by a faint glow. Pixie Bob's eyes lit up with interest. Ah, so these are the 3 kiddies I've heard about, she mused silently. Might make interesting cat play. Mandalay, watching them with a smirk, gave a brief giggle. I take it you're the girls that Aizawa warned us about, she called over to the trio. The girls turned their heads to face the gruff-looking woman. Blossom raised an eyebrow, while Buttercup crossed her arms, unimpressed. Bubbles, however, appeared a little more confused. Forest. Mandalay casually walked over to the cliff's edge, looking down at the rest of the students below who were now in the forest. Also, just so you know, she called out, our territory is private property. So feel free to use your quirks however you want. Her voice carried over the cliffside, loud enough for everyone below to hear. You have 3 hours to reach the facility on foot. Make it through the beast's forest. DMN those F-cat girls. I'm gonna go and blow that bimbo's head off. Bakugou yelled out and kicked a large dirt mound. The other students, still recovering from the surprise attack, blinked in confusion. Did she say beast's forest? Izuku shook himself off, brushing dirt from his clothes as he quickly checked on the others. Seriously? Kaminari grunted as he pulled himself out of the dirt. That sounds like something straight out of Dragon Quest. UA has got way too many connections to weird places like this, Jiro muttered as she patted down her uniform. No point in complaining now, Shoji said, stepping out of a pile of dirt. We'd better get moving. Before anyone could move, a massive creature appeared in their path, standing just inside the tree-line. It was quadrupedal, with a massive jaw full of sharp teeth, 4 large tusks protruding from its face, and a body the color of dirt. It had no eyes, but its presence was enough to send a chill down everyone's spine. An actual beast? Kaminari and Zero cried out in shock at seeing the creature. The students froze, eyes wide in disbelief. "Hey, you guys! We could really use some help here," Kaminari called out, waving frantically toward the floating girls. "A little lift, would ya?" The trio of girls, still hovering above, exchanged glances. They hadn't expected to be faced with a creature like that, but they knew what they had to do. Blossom opened her mouth to speak. "All right, girls, I say." "We." Mandalay's voice interrupted. "Hold on, ladies." She raised a hand, her tone playful yet serious. "We've got a different test for you 3. Sorry, but I can't let you take any of them with you. It's too dangerous. You could hurt them on the way." The girls looked at each other, confused. "What do you mean?" Bubbles asked, confusion in her voice. Mandalay gave Pixie Bob a thumbs up, and the blonde pro's grin turned maniacal. "You'll see," Pixie Bob said, already looking excited as she prepared for something. "I think you girls are about to get a real challenge." Just as the girls were about to ask for clarification, a noise echoed from the distance. Several rocks suddenly flew into the air. Massive stone creatures formed, resembling rock golems, appeared in the far sky. They seemed almost unbelievable. Blossom gasped in surprise. "What the? That's her power." Buttercup groaned, a mixture of irritation and disbelief in her voice. "Seriously?" Mandalay grinned, clearly enjoying herself. "I want to see how you handle those rock beasts. Since you girls can fly, you should have no trouble taking care of them before your friends come to catch up. If you get through them, then that's it. You can meet us at the cabin." Blossom's calculating gaze sharpened as she focused on the flying golems. "All right, girls. Let's handle those dirt clods." Her tone was firm, her determination clear. Buttercup's smirk grew wider. "Now we're talking," she said, already moving toward the incoming creatures. Bubbles hesitated for a moment, her gaze flicking toward the students below. Her heart sank at the thought of leaving Koda behind. He was standing off to the side, looking nervous but calm, and his composure not quite hiding the fear on his face. She gave him a small, reassuring wave, trying to offer some comfort. Koda smiled back, giving her an encouraging nod. His quiet strength was evident as he gave a small wave in return, though the unease still lingered in his eyes. "All right," Bubbles said with a deep breath, shaking off her worry. "Let's do this." With that, the girls shot forward, leaving the others behind. As they sped toward the rock beasts, their focus was solely on the challenge ahead. "You may start," Aizawa said flatly, his eyes still fixed on the students below. The sound of Pixie Bob's excited laugh filled the air as she took her position, ready to oversee the chaos she had orchestrated. "All right, kiddos. Time to see what you're made of." Pixie Bob grinned widely, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Mandalay, standing a little off to the side, glanced at Aizawa. "Pretty crazy pace you've got in mind for these kids, Eraser," she commented with a raised eyebrow, watching the scene unfold. "Well," Aizawa replied with a small grimace, "normally they wouldn't be learning these skills until second year, but we're pushing them faster this year. They need their provisional licenses for quirk use in emergencies. The villains are starting to coordinate, and even first years need to be prepared for anything." The sound of an explosion echoed in the distance, the forest shaking as the challenge began. "They need to learn self-defense, fast," Aizawa finished, his expression unreadable. "Leave it to me," Pixie Bob said excitedly, almost bouncing on her heels. "Let's see how they handle these golems." With that, the students below, still recovering from the initial shockwave, began to make their way through the beast's forest, unaware of the next test that lay ahead. Meanwhile, The girls were already engaged in the challenge, charging toward the flying rock beasts. "Time to move, Koda," Mandalay said as she turned to the young boy, her expression unreadable. Koda followed her, still looking a little nervous but resolute. "Ridiculous. All of them are idiots," Koda muttered, glancing once more at the forest before following after Mandalay. "It's pointless, they want to be heroes." As the students on the ground wrestled with the beast that blocked their path, the girls flew high above, keeping a sharp eye on the flying rock creatures Pixie Bob had summoned. Blossom's sharp gaze locked onto them as she began to formulate a plan. "All right, girls," Blossom called to her sisters, her voice clear and confident. "Let's not take too long with these beasts. We should at least make it there before noon." Buttercup, always ready for a bit of sarcasm, flashed a smirk. "Well, it wouldn't be much of a race if they didn't say so, Einstein." Blossom groaned at the comment, rolling her eyes. "Very well, Butterbrawn, but I'm saying let's give them a little fireworks show." Bubbles gasped in excitement, her eyes sparkling with joy. "Are we doing Plan Delta fireworks again?" "Right," but Blossom nodded with a sly grin. "I've got an idea to make sure they get hit properly. You with me, girls?" "Always." Buttercup gave a thumbs up. "Let's kick some dirt butt." Bubbles cheered, her hands raised in the air. "Let's do this." Blossom's face grew serious as she began her instructions. "Okay, girls. Let's gather them all around and make sure they follow. Then we'll spread out and get ready for the grand finale." The trio split off, taking to the skies at full speed, each making a direct path toward a separate flying beast. Meanwhile, Pixie Bob, who was managing the creatures from the car, observed through her visor, her fingers quickly moving the beast to her control. "They think they can confuse me by spreading out." Pixie Bob smirked, her grin widening. "No way." With a quick command, she redirected the flying rock beasts, sending them into a chase after each of the girls. The creatures immediately turned and followed their targets, eager for the hunt. Blossom smirked when she saw this. She could feel the creatures closing in on her, but it was exactly what she wanted. "Okay, girls. Plan Delta firework. Commence," she called out. The girls immediately went into action, evading the creatures with precision. Blossom twisted and darted through the air at incredible speeds, her body a blur as the dragon-like beast chased after her. The creature roared, snapping its massive jaw, but Blossom was always just a fraction of a second ahead, zipping to the left or right as she expertly dodged each attack. The beast's movement was predictable, its size made it clumsy in the air, giving Blossom just enough time to lead it into position. Buttercup wasn't far behind. Her target, a flying beast of jagged rock, was faster than the others, but that was no problem for her. She used her strength and speed to keep it on her tail, a devilish grin on her face. As it lunged toward her, she did a quick spin, narrowly avoiding the sharp claws and rock shards it shot at her, before twisting around in midair and making a sharp dive, pulling the creature into a sharp loop. She knew her sisters would be able to handle the rest. Bubbles was the most agile of the three, her light movements almost hypnotic as she danced through the air. Her flying beast was a more erratic creature, moving in jerky bursts as it snapped at her, trying to catch her with its jagged teeth. But Bubbles was fast, using her speed and agility to outmaneuver it. She would dart one way, and the creature would follow, only to find that she was already a step ahead, her laughter echoing through the sky. Pixie Bob, her hands hovering over her visor, narrowed her eyes. "They're playing with me," she muttered to herself, getting antsy. "They think they can lead me on a chase. Think again." She gestured a few more commands, sending the beasts into more aggressive maneuvers. But the girls were ready. They weren't just running, this was a plan. They had been working together for years, and their synchronization was flawless. After a few minutes of expertly dodging the beasts and keeping them on their tails, the girls finally began to position themselves. Blossom shot a glance at her sisters, her eyes locking with theirs in perfect unison. They all nodded at once, signaling that it was time. Bubbles held out her hands, her fingers glowing with her signature blue aura. Dozens of translucent blue orbs appeared around her, floating in midair like a cluster of stars. The number was staggering. Over 3 dozen of the small, glowing spheres shimmered, ready for what was next. Buttercup flew in close, her own energy crackling around her as she charged up. She reached out, each of the spheres was covered in charge of ionic green energy, making the small orbs glow brighter with each charge. A hum filled the air as the orbs began to pulse, their power growing exponentially. Blossom, with a focused look on her face, raised her arms, her aura radiating around her like a powerful storm. She called upon her abilities, the air around her thickening with energy. Her hands stretched outward, and she brought the orbs to a halt in midair, using her powers to stop their trajectory. The orbs hovered, suspended in the air in a perfect formation. But Blossom wasn't done yet. This time, instead of compressing them into one tight ball as she had done before, she made them spin. The orbs began to whirl in circles, spinning at high speed, their movements blurring into one another. The colors of the spheres started to shift, the blue-green mixing into shades of pink, as they spun faster, creating a dazzling ring of multicolored light around her. Pixie Bob's eyes widened in disbelief as she watched the girl's power unfold. "What are they doing?" she muttered, her brow furrowing. Then it hit her, the realization coming too late. Wait and oh. But Blossom had already made her move. With a swift, commanding motion, she raised her arms to the sky. The ring of spinning, a multicolored beam shot forward in a blur, the light emanating from it was intensifying as they accelerated toward their targets. The creatures, now in perfect position, were too slow to react. The explosion of color and energy lit up the sky as the beam collided with the beasts. The first hit was a direct strike, and the rock beasts disintegrated in a dazzling explosion of light and energy. The shockwave rippled through the air, and the remaining creatures didn't stand a chance. One by one, they were taken out, falling from the sky in pieces, their once menacing forms shattered by the power of the girl's coordinated attack. Pixie Bob stood in stunned silence, her mouth slightly agape as she processed what had just happened. "No way," she murmured under her breath, completely caught off guard by the sheer scale of the destruction. The girls, now hovering in the sky, watched as the last of the creatures fell. Their breaths were steady, and though they had just pulled off an incredible attack, there was no celebration. They had a mission to complete. "Good job, girls," Blossom looked over at her sisters, her expression cool but proud. "All right, let's go meet up with the others. Time's ticking." With a final glance at the wreckage of the flying beasts, the girls turned and sped toward the next phase of their challenge, leaving a frazzled Pixie Bob to watch in awe at the power and precision of the trio they had just unleashed. Ugh! Those kitties were no fun. Pixie Bob groaned out, but still focused on the others. "Oh well, I still have my other playmates," her maniac smile back. Mandalay commented, "Those 3 are quite skilled." Aizawa, hearing that, couldn't help but think Muse to himself, too skilled to be regular students. PP Cat's catnip in. It was around 5:20 p.m., and the sun was setting in the distance, painting the sky in an appealing array of warm colors. The air was crisp, and the sky blended into shades of pink, oranges, and purples, casting a peaceful and serene atmosphere over the cabin. The Powerpuff Girls were already standing outside, casually waiting for their classmates to arrive. They had gotten to the cabin hours before, beating the others by several hours. In fact, they had arrived so early that Mandalay and Pixie Bob were initially shocked. When they first met Mandalay, she was the only one to greet them with a warm welcome, congratulating them on their obvious teamwork and early arrival. Aizawa, as expected, gave them only a brief nod before retreating to his room, his aloof demeanor making him even more distant than usual. Pixie Bob, on the other hand, was visibly sulking, clearly frustrated that the girls had outsmarted her and gotten there so early, ruining her well-laid plans. The girls exchanged amused glances, but not a single one of them felt any remorse. It wasn't their fault Pixie Bob had underestimated them. After gathering their things and heading to their rooms, Mandalay graciously invited the girls to soak in the hot springs. They eagerly accepted, happy to unwind after the long journey. Mandalay also suggested that if they felt up to it, they could join them in preparing dinner for the group. To everyone's surprise, even Buttercup, they agreed. It seemed like a good way to show goodwill, especially considering that their classmates may have gone through more of a struggle than they had. After finishing up dinner preparations, the girls made their way to the hot springs. They sank into the steaming water, letting the heat relax their muscles and ease the tension from their bodies. The gentle sound of bubbling water and the occasional rustling of leaves above made the moment feel almost magical. After their relaxing soak, the girls were now outside, dressed comfortably in casual clothes. Buttercup wore an oversized green hoodie, black shorts, and a pair of sneakers. Bubbles had on a soft, light blue t-shirt with a cloud design and matching sweatpants, and sandals. Blossom wore a simple with a white shirt, red sweatpants, and sandals. The three of them were talking easily, catching up on small things. As Buttercup and Blossom were discussing about whatever, Bubbles' attention drifted to the small boy leaning against the wall nearby. His face was scrunched up in a scowl, his body tense. Bubbles could sense that he was angry and deeply sad. She couldn't help but feel for him. As their eyes met, she smiled at him warmly, trying to offer some comfort. But the boy only glared back with an intense, almost hostile scowl before turning away. Bubbles' heart sank at the cold reaction, but before she could process her thoughts, Pixie Bob's voice cut through the air. "Ah! The litter is almost here," she announced, grinning, as she stood a distance away from Mandalay and Aizawa. A lot longer than I thought it would," Mandalay muttered, glancing at her watch. "It's already 5:45 p.m. The girls exchanged glances, bracing for their classmates' arrival as they stood by, waiting to see what came next. Moments later, the remaining members of Class 1A stumbled out from the trees. They were clearly exhausted, each of them showing signs of wear from overusing their quirks. Bakugou was grinding his teeth, his right arm shaking uncontrollably, with his left trembling slightly less. Izuku looked completely exhausted. Todoroki had patches of frost clinging to his right side, while his left was singed from the heat. Ida dragged his feet, the small puffs of smoke from his exhaust pipes betraying his fatigue. Mina tottered along, looking unsteady, clearly dehydrated from pushing her quirk too hard. Koda moved stiffly, tried to massage his throat, evidence of how much he'd strained his voice and body with his quirk. Tsuyu shuffled along, her tongue hanging out slightly as she supported Uraraka, who was struggling to keep her stomach from betraying her. One by one, the weary students made their way into view. Buttercup whistled low. "Dang, they look worse for wear," she commented, and her sisters couldn't help but agree. "You said it would take 3 hours," Tokoyami, looking disheveled, spoke to Pixie Bob and Mandalay, his voice laced with exhaustion. "Wee-ee-ee-ee." Kaminari called out, his brain clearly fried. He wobbled in place, too overwhelmed to even sit down, his expression blank. "I guess we timed it based on how long it would take us." "Sorry," Mandalay said with a mischievous grin, tapping her chin with the index finger of her puffy glove. "Flaunting the power gap in our faces? That's just cruel," Ciro grumbled, barely able to stay upright, his legs giving out. Aizawa stepped forward with a mischievous smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. He glanced over at the girls, still standing at the entrance of the cabin, and made a comment that was clearly meant to stir up trouble. Well, it seemed like your 3 other classmates managed to get here in 1 hour," Aizawa said, his tone laced with sarcasm. "If it wasn't so hard for them, having to handle Flying Beast, what's your excuses?" The girls caught off guard, looked over at the man with mixed reactions. Buttercup's eyes narrowed, her fists clenching at her sides as she shot Aizawa a glare. Blossom crossed her arms tightly, her lips pressed into a thin line. Bubbles frowned deeply, feeling both irritated and caught off guard by the teacher's comment. Why single them out? The three exchanged a look, annoyance clear in their eyes, before their gazes shifted to their classmates. Many of them weren't pleased, and not surprisingly, Bakugou, who was already grinding his teeth in frustration. DMN it. How did those cheaters get here so fast, huh? Bakugou exploded, his temper flaring as usual. Mina, looking unsteady, piped up, how did you even manage that? I feel like I'm gonna collapse any second. Zero, his arms crossed tightly, shot them a resentful look. Seriously, what's the deal? We've been busting our butts out here for hours. Mandalay immediately stepped in, sensing the brewing tension, and gave Aizawa a quick, pointed glare before crossing her arms and walking over to his side, her tone smooth but firm. It was pretty obvious none of you were going to make it on time, Mandalay said, offering a playful smile as she addressed the class. In fact, you all did better than we expected for the first test. I'm impressed. Pixie Bob clapped her paw gloves together in delight. You kids are amazing, she said, her voice bright with excitement. Watching you break through my quirk creations so quickly was incredible. Her eyes shifted over to the right, where a few specific students were standing, and her expression became a little more playful. Especially, she purred, licking her lips. You four were really special. Huh? Izuku, noticing the shift in Pixie Bob's attention, blinked and looked at his classmates, Todoroki, Bakugou, and Ida. Us? Pixie Bob's grin widened. Oh, I can already see it. You'll be perfect for some fun in a few years. With that, Pixie Bob stepped forward, pounced on them, I'm gonna groom them, myself. Blowing exaggerated kisses toward the boys, clearly enjoying the effect her attention had on them. The boys immediately recoiled, with Bakugou snarling in annoyance, cut that CRP out. But Pixie Bob seemed undeterred, practically basking in the chaos. Buttercup muttered under her breath to her sisters, clearly irritated, weren't we the ones who got here first? The frustration in her voice was unmistakable as she glared at the blonde hero. Blossom, ever the level-headed one, just sighed and shook her head. At least she got the attention off of us. She clearly has favorites, Bubbles said to her sisters, she's not even trying to hide it, she said, but her attention was quickly stolen by Pixie Bob's voice again. Don't worry, my main CN. Pixie Bob purred, her gaze landing on Koda. I haven't forgotten about my favorite kitty. Koda stiffened, his body still exhausted and unable to move properly. Pixie Bob's teasing only seemed to make him more uncomfortable. She then pounced at him, come to MOW. Pixie Bob was pushed backwards, surprised at the sudden barrier. What's this? She purred with a frown, but her playful tone faltered as she realized she couldn't get to Koda. Before anything could happen, Bubbles had stepped in. Her blue eyes narrowed as she summoned a force field around Koda, preventing Pixie Bob from getting any closer. Bubbles stood firm beside him, her hands still raised. She turned to Koda with a soft, caring smile. Are you okay? Koda nodded weakly, managing a faint smile despite his exhaustion. Yeah, I'm okay. Thanks, Bubbles. With a nod, Bubbles released the force field, her gaze hardening as she shot one last look at Pixie Bob. Without saying another word, she gently guided Koda away. Pixie Bob, still caught off guard, watched them for a moment, her expression shifting to a smirk. Well, I see the main CN has already found his mate, she muttered under her breath, brushing herself off with a shrug. Oh well, plenty of kitties in the litter for me. Aizawa looked over to the leader of the wild pussycats. Hey, Mandalay, was she always like this? It's gotten worse recently. Mandalay sighed. She's at the age that she's starting to worry about finding a mate. Izuku noticed the small kid from before glaring at them all and pointed towards him. Excuse me, but whose kid is that? Oh. That's my nephew, Koda. Mandalay smiled at the boy. Don't be shy, Koda, say hi, you'll be seeing these guys for the next week. Izuku trudged over. Hi there, Izuku said with a large and happy smile. I'm Midoriya, how ragh. Kota lashed out and punched Izuku in the junk. Deku. Uraraka screamed watching him collapse in a shaky mess. OCRP. Buttercup exclaimed, ignoring the urge to throttle the BRT. Blossom and Bubbles both had hands over their mouths in shock, just imagining the pain their classmate is going through. They never aim there, even if the villain deserves it. Izuku's mouth opened, but no sounds came out as he fell to his knees from the unexpected nut shot. Midoriya. Ida rushed over to his friend's side as fast as his exhausted body would let him. You fiend of a child. Why would you do that? A punch to the SCRTM is unforgivable. Kota turned to glare at Ida. The last thing I want is to hang around with some wannabe heroes. That BRT's got spunk. Bakugou actually grinned at Kota. Todoroki looked over at Bakugou with a flat stare. He's like a mini version of you. Huh? What are you talking about? You can just shut your mouth before I blast you straight to hell, icy hot. Bakugou growled at Todoroki. Yeah, sure. Todoroki clearly didn't care about Bakugou's threat. Enough playing around. Aizawa spoke up, making all of the students turn to face him. Get your luggage off the bus. After you've put it in your rooms, then we'll have dinner in the cafeteria. After that you can bathe and sleep. He laid out the plan for the rest of the day. Tomorrow your training starts in earnest. You'd better get a move on. Aizawa motioned towards the front doors. Later cafeteria. A massive feast had been prepared for the students, and the spread before them was nothing short of magnificent. Tables upon tables were laden with all types of food, everything from simple dishes to more intricate delicacies. There was beef, chicken, pork, seafood, vegetables, fruit, rice, just about anything the students could want was there for their dinner. Thank you for the food. The students all clapped their hands together in unison, showing their gratitude. No sooner had the words left their lips than they dug in, eager to finally eat after such a demanding day. Kaminari, his eyes lighting up at the deliciousness of the tonkatsu, immediately began scarfing down his rice as well. It's so good. Almost as good as Lunch Rush's food. I can't stop. Kirishima exclaimed, savoring his own tonkatsu as if it were a life-saving meal. This is so amazing. I feel like a new man. Meanwhile, the two pussycats were moving back and forth through the cafeteria, bringing the students more food to keep their bellies full. Ha ha ha. You kids act like you haven't eaten in a week. Pixie Bob laughed heartily as she took an empty platter from one of the students and replaced it with a fresh batch of gyoza. Anyway, today's the only day we're doing this for you, so make sure you enjoy it while it lasts. Just as the students were about to dig in again, Mandalay stood at the edge of the room with a knowing smile. By the way, she called out to the students, drawing their attention, you should also be thanking those 3 classmates of yours. The room quieted as everyone turned to look at the girls. Mandalay continued, since they got here earlier than you all, they wanted to help make this feast possible for all of you. So make sure you thank them as well. Seeing as you are eating their hard work, she trailed off, giving a small wink before heading off to check on the other food preparations. The students, a little taken aback, quickly turned their attention to the girls. Some of them didn't know exactly what to say, looking between each other uncertainly. Kirishima, not missing a beat, loudly declared, "Thanks, Blossom. You and your sisters are awesome for helping in cooking all of this for us." Blossom blinked in surprise but smiled, feeling touched by the praise. "No problem, glad you all like it," she replied warmly, returning to her own meal with a soft blush. Bubbles smiled brightly and nodded. "It's okay. We're happy to help." Bakugou, unimpressed with all the thanks, simply scoffed and clicked his tongue. "TCH, whatever. No thanks. Just let me eat." He shoved another mouthful of food into his mouth, clearly uninterested in the praise. Mina and Siro, on the other hand, exchanged awkward glances, clearly feeling a little embarrassed by their earlier actions. The weight of the situation and the attention made them uneasy, but they quickly returned to their food, silently thankful for the meal in front of them. Izuku, however, turned his attention to Buttercup and gave her a warm, genuine smile. "Thanks, Buttercup," he said sincerely. "I really appreciate you and your sisters helping out to make this food for us." Buttercup blinked, a little taken aback by the direct thank you. Then, with a characteristic grin, she gave him a thumbs up. "No problem," she replied, her tone casual but kind. Izuku smiled back, nodding in acknowledgement before turning his attention to Kota. The boy was quietly moving boxes around, seemingly trying to get everything organized. Izuku watched him for a moment, his expression thoughtful as he observed the boy's angry expression. The night gradually wound down as the students, their bellies full and spirits lifted, made their way to the hot springs for a much-needed soak. The warm water soothed their tired muscles, washing away the stress of the day's challenges. Afterward, they changed into their comfortable pajamas and headed to their rooms, the quiet hum of the night surrounding them. One by one, the students drifted to bed, the exhaustion of the day finally catching up with them. The soft sounds of gentle breathing filled the rooms as they each settled in, preparing for whatever tomorrow might bring. For now, though, rest was all they needed. Tomorrow was another day, and the adventure was far from over. "Good morning," Aizawa's monotone voice cut through the cool morning air as he looked over the students. "Good, you're all here." "So early," Kaminari yawned, rubbing his eyes, his voice still thick with sleep. "Yeah, like, what the actually f, silence, Kamakiri." Vlad King reprimanded the boy. The students were on day 2 of the forest training camp. By 5:45 a.m., both classes 1A and 1B had been rousted from their beds in the catnip inn. The students of class 1A, who had arrived earlier the day before, were already awake, while the members of class 1B, who had arrived later, were grumbling under their breath about their lack of sleep. Some were half-heartedly attempting to clear the sleep from their eyes, while others let out loud yawns. "Now, as I was saying," Aizawa continued, his monotone voice remaining steady, "today, we'll begin training designed to increase your quirk strength." His piercing gaze swept over the tired faces. "Our goal is to enhance your abilities exponentially to ensure you're ready to earn your provisional licenses. This will prepare you for the challenges ahead. Remember, proceed carefully." At the mention of the provisional licenses, the Powerpuff Girls perked up, their minds immediately connecting the dots. Getting those licenses would be the next step in their journey to confront him. Aizawa took a brief moment to rustle through his pocket and pulled out a familiar object, a softball-sized device, and looked over at Bakugou. "Look alive, Bakugou," Aizawa called, tossing the device to the blonde. Bakugou caught it easily and eyed it, his expression shifting between curiosity and annoyance. "What, you want me to throw this again? Like in the fitness test?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Bubbles, her eyes widening, couldn't help but think to herself, hopefully, he won't attempt to blow anyone else up in the process. Aizawa nodded, his voice still as flat as ever. "That's right. When you first entered this school, your record was 705.2 meters. Let's see if you've improved." 705.2? Kamakiri scoffed, clearly unimpressed. "Manga beat everyone in both classes by hitting 830 meters. Is that really the best you can do, Class A?" he asked, crossing his arms with an air of superiority. "No, actually," Narenjiki, a short, round-faced student from Class 1B, interjected. His ice-blue hair matched his cool demeanor as he spoke up. "I believe the highest launch across both classes was a distance of 900 meters. He glanced at Bakugou with mild interest. "Pretty impressive, don't you think?" That got the raven-haired Powerpuff to smirk internally. Bakugou narrowed his eyes at the sudden remarks from his peers but ignored them. Instead, he focused on his target, ready to show them all how much he'd improved. As he walked over to where Aizawa was pointing, he could already hear his classmates' predictions and excited murmurs. "Oh! I get it now!" Mina exclaimed, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten as her energy returned. This is to see how far we've come in our training, right? Do you think Bakugou's going to hit 2 kilometers this time? Wouldn't be surprising after all the drills we've been through, Zero added. Enthusiastically. Go for it, Bakugou. You've got this. Bakugou took a deep breath, sizing up the distance ahead of him. He glanced at a few classmates who had been particularly vocal, sneering at them in his mind. I'll show these extras just how much I've improved. Winding up his arm, Bakugou set his focus on the task at hand, his fiery determination burning in his chest. "TCH, I got this," he muttered under his breath, steeling himself. With a swift motion, he unleashed a powerful explosion from his palm, shouting, "Go to hell," as the force of his quirk propelled the ball forward with incredible speed. Bam! The blast of wind from the kickback sent gusts rushing toward the students, causing them to shield their eyes and brace themselves. If anyone had been feeling even the slightest bit sleepy before, they were wide awake now, both from the deafening noise of Bakugou's war cry and the force of the explosion itself. Go to hell? Were the shared thoughts of Izuku and Blossom. As the dust settled, Bakugou stood tall, a smug grin stretching across his face as he waited for the results. He felt confident, sure he'd broken some record and maybe even surpassed his classmates. However, Aizawa was silent, looking down at the measuring device in his hand with an almost indifferent expression. After a moment, there was a soft ding, and Aizawa's gaze flicked to the screen. 709.6 meters, he announced flatly, showing the result to everyone. There was a collective gasp from the students, their eyes widening in disbelief. Even Bakugou, who had expected to have shattered the previous records, felt a sinking sensation in his stomach. His face fell slightly as the weight of the results set in. Huh. Only 4.4 more. Quite disappointing, Zero commented. I honestly thought that he would have gotten close to 800, Jairus said with a shrug. 709.6, he thought, feeling a sting of disappointment. Not even 710 meters, despite the blow to his pride, Bakugou quickly hid his frustration. He refused to let anyone see him rattled. Vlad King then took the opportunity to speak up. Listen up. You've had a single semester in UA, and although I don't know much of first-hand experience of Class 1A, I can say for certainty that due to your various experiences, all of you have definitely improved, he stated, but those improvements seem to only be limited to mental prowess and technical skill with added stamina for good measure. That is decent, but your quirks is what we want to work on, and that is the point of this exercise. Are we seriously going to be spending time to develop our quirks? One of the Class B students said in between yawns. Yes, Vlad Kind said, looking back at his students, your quirks haven't been keeping up with your physical development, which forces you to give up on some applications for your quirks and focus on what you can do right now. If you want to improve as future heroes, then you have to strengthen your quirks. Setsuna spoke up, Yo teach, I get us having to strengthen your quirks like it's no big deal, but there's 40 of us, each with a different quirk. How do we each go about doing this? Yeah. We need more details here. Tetsu agreed with Setsuna. Simple, Vlad announced, when we work out our muscles, the fibers break down and build up to become stronger, but if we neglect them, they become weaker. So, the best way to train your quirks is to break past your limits, he declared, and most of the students gasped at what they heard. Even with all the murmurs, Blossom finally spoke up, but with 40 of us, can 6 people effectively help everyone, questioning more out of curiosity than fear from the implication. That's why these guys are here, Aizawa blankly answered. That's correct. 4 kitties in one litter. A certain green-haired woman popped out of nowhere, her voice full of cheer, wearing a familiar-looking outfit, but this one was in yellow. Your feline fantasies are here. Say meow. Mandalay declared. We've come to lend a helping paw. Ragdoll continued, spinning with the same enthusiasm as earlier. We're here, serving up justice, with our tails. A male member spoke, flexing his muscles as he posed. His outfit was the same as the other girls but was brown in color. Stunningly cute and cat-like heroes. Pixie Bob exclaimed. Wild, wild pussycats. Full version. The four posed together, now able to complete their well-known hero team routine. Does anyone else get the weird sense of déjà vu, here? Buttercup groaned out, still not in the mood at the moment. At the end, a few members of Class A clapped nonetheless for the pussycats, though some of the students and majority of Class B were clearly taken aback by the sudden arrival and posing of the four pro heroes so early and fresh in the morning. Alright, kiddies, introduction time. Hi, I'm Ragdoll and my quirk is called Search. Ragdoll grinned brightly at the students. I know almost everything about a person just by looking at them. That includes weaknesses and their location. Up to 100 people at a time. Blossom and her sisters were giving each other glances at the implications of her powers and what it could mean for them. I'm Pixie Bob. With my earth flow I can make the ideal training ground for each and every one of you. Pixie Bob demonstrated by making large hills and cliffs form from the dirt dozens of meters away. I am also looking for any cute strong types. Shamelessly winked at the male populace of the group, they were expectedly weirded out. Mandalay here. And I use my telepath to give advice to all of you in real time. Mandalay smiled at the students. The name's Tiger, and I'm here to beat you guys into a pulp. Tiger said plainly, a scary aura radiated from his being. That's really different from the other three. The students all thought at the same time. All of you power-up types come with me. Tiger beckoned them over with one of the claws on his puffy cat glove. My boot camp is ready to go. Several students strode over, looking warily at the pro hero, already knowing they were in for a rough time. Hearing that, Buttercup was suddenly energized and cracking her knuckles in preparation. Vlad looked at his students again before they were divided up for training. Emitter types with maximum output levels need to raise their limits. Mutant types need to strengthen their bodies and the traits that come along with their quirks. Transformation types need to increase the speed of their shifting and make it more fluid and natural on top of further increasing their abilities granted by their transformations. This'll be so hard that you'll wish that you were dead, so do your best to stay alive. Aizawa smiled at his students, the look coming off as vaguely sadistic to all of them. That's not reassuring at all. Most of the students screamed in their heads simultaneously. As the morning sun began to climb higher, it was close to 7 a.m. now, the brisk air cutting through the camp as Aizawa and Vlad walked side by side, their conversation a dull hum in the midst of all the commotion. Aizawa's voice was as flat as ever, barely expressing any interest in whatever topic they were discussing, while Vlad, ever the enthusiastic one, animatedly responded to his colleague's minimal engagement. As they neared the area where the pro heroes were overseeing the students, Aizawa's gaze shifted to Ragdoll, who was busy guiding some of the students in their exercises. He approached her without breaking his usual, emotionless stride. How's it going? Aizawa asked, his voice devoid of any real concern. Ragdoll looked up with a bright smile, things are going about to answer, but she was cut off by a sudden deafening explosion from a distance. Oh. Be right back. She said quickly, her smile never fading as she cartwheeled away toward the source of the noise. Looks like Bakugou's already off to a fiery start, he muttered, clearly used to the chaos Bakugou often caused. Vlad raised an eyebrow, that boy seems a bit too volatile. Aizawa simply stared ahead, he'll learn eventually. But Vlad just gave a skeptical look. DMNIT. Boom. Bakugou yelled out in pain and frustration as he shoved his hands into a barrel of scalding water, feeling his hands burning as he yanked them out and pointed his palms to the sky and unleashed a massive explosion once again. Gritting his teeth, he shoved them back into the near boiling water as his hands burned. Ayaha. Ha ha ha. You are a really loud one, aren't you? Came the incoming voice of Ragdoll. Bakugou's brow twitched to the high-pitched voice behind him, looking back to see a green-haired woman. Shut up, cat girl. Let me do my thing, he yelled at the third pussycat member. Ha ha ha. I have to check on all you little guys to make sure you follow your training. The woman named Ragdoll giggled at his frustrated face. You need to expand the sweat glands in your hands to lower the strain on your arms. I know already. You told me 3 times. It. Bakugou growled and ripped his hands out of the water and released another large blast into the sky. I know what the hell I'm doing. Laughing at his frustration, Ragdoll turned around and watched as the other students of Class 1A were straining all across the mountainside. Her quirk search observed every student as they strained with the training they were given specifically made for each of them, focused directly on what was their weaknesses to push past. Some like Ciro and Mina had to continuously release tape and acid to maximize the amount they could produce, to force themselves to keep going even when they felt strain on their bodies. She had Ochako currently inside a orb and bouncing around to strengthen her inner ear canal to help prevent nausea while using her quirk for long periods of time. She saw Todoroki sitting chest deep in a barrel of water with a fire lit under it. Steam wafted off the exceedingly hot water and Todoroki was sweating heavily. He slapped the barrel and ice exploded from his body, freezing the water and extinguishing the fire below instantly. His training was focused on rapidly switching between ice and fire, while also boosting his natural resistance to both extreme heat and extreme cold. The end goal was to be able to use both fire and ice simultaneously, but that was proving incredibly hard for Todoroki to do at the moment. She watched as Tenya burst around the mountain, pushing his legs to the utmost limit with no break to build his engine endurance. All around, the students grunted, yelled and cried as they strained themselves to push their quirks to the limit. And it was only 7 in the morning, having only been doing this for a little more than an hour. She grinned to herself as she looked past Momo, the girl stuffing her face with food as she continued to create items non-stop to boost her body's production of lipids to see the Class B students straining as well. In their section, Mandalay walked through the groups as they pushed themselves. The vine girl, Shiozaki, continuously released her vines outward, sweating as she had never done so many at one time while Juzo softened the mountainside in front of him, his hands shaking as he expanded the range of his softening as far as he possibly could before re-hardened it. All of you can feel the strain in your body. That is your quirks feeling their limits tested. Mandalay's voice rang out to almost all the students in the area, only it was inside their head. Her telepathy quirk allowed her to speak inside of their minds, giving perfect access to them instantly. Your quirks are like muscles. The more they are strained, the more they will grow. We are here to make sure you are pushed past your limits so you can get stronger. Mandalay's telepathic voice faded as the students continued to push themselves, the air still filled with grunts and strained exertion. She was about to check on some of the others when she felt the familiar presence of Aizawa approaching. His footsteps were deliberate and unhurried, and his tired gaze fixed on her with that perpetual, emotionless intensity. She gave him a small smile and nodded in greeting as he came to stand beside her. Aizawa, she said, keeping her voice even, though her tone was warm. He gave a brief nod in return. Everything going according to plan? His voice was as flat and unengaged as ever, though there was the barest hint of curiosity lurking in his words. Mandalay glanced around at the students. Yeah. They're pushing themselves hard. All of them are really giving it their best today. Even Class B is keeping up with the intensity. We're seeing steady progress. Her eyes tracked the students as they strained and struggled, each trying to break their limits. Aizawa's gaze followed her focus, and after a moment's pause, he nodded, accepting her answer. The silence stretched on for a beat longer than usual, the sound of Bakugou's explosion still reverberating in the distance. Then, as if on cue, Ragdoll's voice chimed in from behind them, cheerful and bright as always. Hey, hey. Aizawa, Mandalay, guess what? The kiddies are struggling a little, but they're doing perfect. Hee hee, just as I thought, those little furballs really know how to push their limits. Meow. Aizawa didn't even flinch at her usual, overly enthusiastic tone. He merely glanced toward her and muttered a quiet, mm. His face remained as expressionless as ever. Mandalay, on the other hand, gave a quiet chuckle, shaking her head as Ragdoll continued to laugh at herself. "Sounds like you're having fun with the new litter," Mandalay remarked, though her focus remained on Aizawa. "All that's well and good, but," Aizawa's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't respond to Ragdoll's antics. "What would you make of some of the more standout students?" he asked suddenly, his voice filled with precision than usual. It was an odd question that caught Mandalay and Ragdoll off guard. The two women exchanged a confused look, before Ragdoll tilted her head in genuine curiosity. "What about them? Are you asking about their training?" she asked, trying to make sense of his abrupt change in tone. Aizawa didn't answer right away, instead turning his attention back to the students. He looked toward where the specific students were training. Mandalay and Ragdoll followed his gaze, all three of them momentarily distracted by the sight of their pupils. Blossom stood at the center of the training area, her focus unwavering as Pony Tsunatori and Reiko Yanagi took their positions. The exercise was simple: test each of their emitter abilities under pressure. For Blossom, it was a challenge of focus and control over her enhanced reflexes and psychokinesis. For Pony and Reiko, it was a test of how well they could manage their quirks while working in tandem. Pony launched her first horn with a sharp flick of her head, aiming it straight at Blossom's chest. With barely a blink, Blossom sidestepped, her reflexes honed to perfection. She whipped out her hand, telekinetically plucking a large rock from the ground and flinging it at the horn, knocking it off course. Reiko quickly followed, sending a series of rocks flying at Blossom from all angles. Blossom dodged each one with grace, her body flowing effortlessly between the projectiles. Her psychokinesis kept her grounded as she grabbed a large chunk of stone, tossing it back at Reiko with pinpoint accuracy, forcing the girl to dive out of the way. Pony, determined not to be outdone, fired another set of horns, one aiming high and the other low, trying to catch Blossom off guard. Blossom's reflexes allowed her to dip low, narrowly avoiding the first while swatting the second out of the air with a flick of her fingers. The rock she threw in retaliation made Pony duck, but not fast enough, and it clipped her side. The two girls from Class 1B worked in sync, launching rocks and horns in quick succession, but Blossom's precision and speed outpaced their efforts. She used her telekinesis to grab and redirect their attacks effortlessly, her focus sharp and unyielding. The exercise was meant to challenge not only Blossom's ability to control her powers under pressure but also to test Pony and Reiko's control over their quirks as they tried to coordinate their attacks. But Blossom's mastery over her reflexes and psychokinesis made her a nearly untouchable target, forcing the Class 1B students to constantly adjust their strategies. With a final move, Blossom snapped her fingers, sending a rush of telekinetic energy toward the two girls. The blast forced them both back, leaving them panting in the dirt while Blossom remained steady, her control over her abilities unquestioned. "Focus and control," she muttered to herself, her expression calm, as she waited for the next round. At the far end of the training field, the other students, including Izuku, lay sprawled out, exhausted from their grueling exercises. Their eyes were now fixed on Tiger and Buttercup, locked in a heated spar. Their movements were a blur of powerful strikes and swift counters. "Bring it on, little cub. Show me what you've got," Tiger yelled, a taunting grin stretching across his face. Buttercup, standing confidently across from him in her black sports br and school track pants, smirked and stepped forward, accepting his challenge. She launched into a relentless series of punches and kicks. Tiger managed to dodge and block each attack, going in to deliver his, but Buttercup's reflexes were too fast for him to land a solid hit. Tiger, intrigued but determined, charged forward, unleashing a vicious cat punch. With all his might, he swung at her, claws extended. But Buttercup stood her ground, meeting his punch with an open palm. The small shockwave from the impact sent a tremor through the air, momentarily staggering Tiger. His grin faltered as he took a step back, shaking off the disorientation. "Not bad for a big cat," Buttercup taunted, her voice dripping with playful confidence. She wasted no time, dropping to a crouch and delivering a powerful punch directly into his gut. The blow sent him stumbling backward, rolling a few feet away before quickly recovering. Tiger wiped his mouth, chuckling as he rose to his feet, a spark of admiration in his eyes. He watched as Buttercup stood ready, her confident grin still intact. Without a word, she gestured for him to bring it on, a clear challenge in her stance. Tiger's grin now widened into a full-on cat-like smile. He pounced forward with lightning speed, his body stretching and contorting in mid-air to avoid Buttercup's swift jabs. She countered with a spinning kick aimed at his head, but Tiger ducked under it, using his enhanced agility to keep himself in motion. He attempted another cat punch from the side, but Buttercup blocked it with a raised forearm and immediately retaliated with a quick jab to his ribs. The clash of blows continued, each one more intense than the last. Tiger tried to catch her with a low sweep, but Buttercup leapt over it, landing behind him. Before he could react, she drove a knee into his back, sending him forward. Tiger grinned despite the impact. This little cub has claws, he muttered to himself, eager to keep going. As Aizawa, Mandalay, and Ragdoll observed the students pushing themselves, Mandalay spoke up, her admiration clear. "I've trained a lot of students, but some of them are something else. Their skills and quirk control are impressive." Ragdoll grinned, nodding enthusiastically. "Yeah, especially the red kitty. Her control over her telekinesis under pressure. Unbelievable. I've never seen anyone handle their quirk so smoothly. The girl's reflexes are on another level, too. She's so fast and precise it's like she was born for this." Mandalay nodded in agreement, and the Buttercup is really giving Tiger a good spar. Quite impressive indeed. Aizawa didn't respond right away, his gaze fixed on the students, his expression unreadable. Ragdoll continued, unaware of the subtle shift in his mood. "Seriously, they're adapting so quickly to everything we throw at them. It's like they're just naturally gifted." She chuckled at the implication, not knowing some ideas of others. Aizawa muttered under his breath, barely audible, "Yeah, gifted but still students." His tone was skeptical, but there was something else in his voice, something distant, almost suspicious, like he was measuring every word and action. The two women exchanged a glance. Mandalay raised an eyebrow. "You alright, Aizawa? You seem a bit off today." Ragdoll tilted her head. "Yeah, you're usually more, well, Aizawa than this. You don't think there's something more to these kids, do you?" She flashed a quick grin, clearly not expecting an answer. Aizawa remained silent for a moment, his gaze lingering on the students, though his mind seemed far away. "They've got a long way to go," he finally muttered, as if unconvinced. Mandalay and Ragdoll looked at each other again, both sensing that something was a little off, but neither one pressed it further. With a sigh, Aizawa turned to leave, his pace unhurried. "I'll leave the rest to you." Ragdoll chuckled, watching him go. "You know, he'll never admit they're doing well." Mandalay nodded, her eyes following him thoughtfully. "Yeah, but today feels different. He seemed, I don't know, almost suspicious." It's Aizawa," Ragdoll waved it off with a grin. "Always the worrywart and suspicious of everyone. I wouldn't read too much into it." Maybe Mandalay let it go for now, but her gaze lingered on Aizawa's retreating figure. "But something's off with him today. I guess we'll see. Well, no matter what, I'm excited to see where these kids go from here." Ragdoll didn't seem to mind, already bouncing back to focus on the students. And so they went about their teaching of the other students, or in Ragdoll's case, giving insightful criticism while openly laughing at their pain and tiredness. In the forest, a short distance away from the training grounds and not too far from the perimeter, Bubbles sat alone in a quiet patch of trees. Her legs were crossed, her eyes closed as she focused on her breathing slow, deliberate, in and out. She whispered a short mantra to herself, "Feel the feelings, but they are not your own, feel the feelings, but they are not your own," repeating it over and over like a calming chant. When they were told about the early morning training, Bubbles was happy to partner with Koda, helping him with his quirk control, offering a bit of guidance with her own talent for communicating with animals. However, later on, Bubbles asked Pixie Bob if she could work on another aspect of her abilities, her more empathic powers, alone in the woods. The blonde member was a bit skeptical, not having seen any references to this ability in Aizawa's notes, but Bubbles simply explained it was related to a keen sense of sound. So, she was left to train on her own. Her blue aura began to glow faintly at first, then grew brighter, pulsing with energy as it expanded from her body, filling the air around her. The soft, soothing light ebbed and flowed, almost as if it had a life of its own. As the energy spread, Bubbles let it pour out, fully embracing the moment. The glow faded slightly, but the pulse of power lingered, swirling around her like an unseen force. Suddenly, the quiet forest seemed to shift as her powers activated. She began to hear the array of emotions and feelings around her, like little voices, whispers coming from all directions, fragments of the deeper psyche of those nearby. Her breath hitched as her chest tightened, and the voices grew louder, more chaotic, signifying the intensity of the emotions they carried. Bits and pieces of sentences floated through her mind, jumbled and unintelligible. This is pointless. What's the point of even doing this? Frustration. These teachers are going to kill us. Fear. How am I supposed to push my quirk like this? Sadness. She felt her aura flare and spark with energy as sweat began to form on her brow. Her breath grew ragged, and she struggled to maintain control. Focus, she whispered to herself, chanting her new mantra, feel the feelings, but they are not your own. She focused hard, trying to regain her composure. Slowly, her breathing steadied, but the voices still swirled in her mind like echoes she couldn't escape. With a mental force that was becoming more difficult to maintain, she pushed them away, one by one. But then, a particular voice pierced through the noise, clear, sharp, almost painful. It rang out with an intensity that made Bubbles' heart skip a beat. Idiots! Why even work so hard to get killed? Heroes are the worst. Bubbles gasped, her focus shattering from the loud, angry, sorrowful words. Her chest tightened, and for a moment, it felt as though the world itself was closing in on her. She struggled to calm her breathing, but the sadness in that voice struck her like a blow. Her head swam with the echo of those words. Oh my, she whispered, her voice trembling. A deep, aching sadness welled up inside her. For a moment, Bubbles couldn't shake the pain that seeped into her heart. She clutched her chest, feeling the weight of the emotions she couldn't escape. The voices faded, but the sorrow lingered, like an unanswered cry for help. Bubbles sat there, her aura dimming. The peaceful calm she had sought slipped away as she allowed the grief to settle within her. Her mind was awash with questions she didn't have answers to, but one thought stood out clearly in the depths of her troubled heart. Who had said that? And why? 4 p.m. dinner preparation. By the time dinner arrived, nearly every student at the camp was aching with exhaustion and discomfort. The situation only seemed worse as they were required to prepare their own meals. The tables were covered with familiar ingredients, and brick camp stoves lined one side, ready to be fueled with firewood and lit. The 40 weary students stood in front of the setup, some confused, others already anticipating what was coming. If you want to eat, you have to cook for yourselves. Ragdoll grinned mischievously as she clawed at the air. Her energy seemed endless. Today, we're making curry, she added, you all look like you've been through the ringer. That's why we won't be making any basic meals today, this will be no ordinary kitty chow, her laughter ringing out as she looked at the students. But of course, Ida perked up and tapped his chin thoughtfully for a moment. In times of disaster and evacuation, someone has to feed the weary and soothe the souls of fatigued citizens, he said, turning to the other 39 students. His voice grew louder with enthusiasm. That's all part of rescue operations. And UA never misses a teaching moment. Let's make the tastiest curry in the world, everyone. He chopped his hand through the air to emphasize his determination. Honestly, I feel bad for Class 1A, dealing with him there, Setsuna quietly muttered to an equally tired Kodai, who merely nodded in agreement. In the next few minutes the students were washed up, and while some students begged others to cook for them, a number of them took the initiative and got to work. Blossom was one of them. She stepped forward to an empty station and began preparing. "Hey, Buttercup," Blossom called. "Can you start the fire, and then help Bubbles with chopping the vegetables? I'll handle the base and get our station set up." The two sisters nodded and went to work without any fuss. While many of the others were still getting things together, Blossom was already deep into her task, focused on preparing the necessary spices. "Hey, Blossom." She turned around to see Kirishima standing behind her. "I'd like to help out, too," he said with a grin. Blossom blinked in surprise. Oh, Kirishima, you know you don't have to, right? I understand if you're tired," so, she trailed off, unsure how to respond. Kirishima shook his head. "Nah, Blossom. You and your sisters already cooked for us the other night, and even though you went through some brutal training of your own, it wouldn't be right to let you do all the work again." His voice was sincere and serious. "So, I'm here to step up and lend a hand. It's the manly thing to do after all," he declared with a wide, confident smile. Blossom smiled, touched by his words. "Well, if you insist, I could definitely use an extra pair of hands." Kirishima eagerly got to work, setting up another station nearby. "Says the girl with telekinesis," Buttercup muttered, taking her place at one of the brick camp stoves. "Anyway, fire in the hole." Her eyes glowed as she shot laser beams at the firewood, instantly sparking a blaze. Bakugou, seeing this, gritted his teeth. "What a puny trick. I'll show you flames," he declared, marching over to another stove. "Bakugou. You can't make fire with explosions," Zero warned, backing away from the stove Bakugou was approaching. "Watch me." Bakugou grinned and placed his palm against the firewood. With a confident smirk, he activated his quirk and bam! The resulting explosion blew apart the stove, leaving a smoking wreckage in its wake. "See? I told you so," Zero remarked dryly, as Bakugou stood frozen, his face twitching in frustration. "Can we get some fire over here, Todoroki?" Mina called from the stove she and Toru were working on. "Everyone. If we always rely on others, we'll never learn to make fire ourselves." Momo interjected, her hand glowing in a spectrum of colors as she conjured a lighter with a long nozzle, casually flicking it on to start her own fire. "You make it look so easy, Yamamoto," Jiro remarked from beside Momo, rolling her eyes. With the fires finally crackling to life, the other students found their rhythm. The sound of chopping vegetables, sizzling spices, and light-hearted banter began to fill the air. Though fatigue still lingered, the camp atmosphere had taken on a livelier tone. Finishing up chopping the last of the vegetables, Bubbles made her way over to the cooking station. However, as she moved, her eyes unexpectedly glowed, and she felt that familiar surge of negative emotions. Her breath caught in her chest, and she paused. She rarely allowed herself to use this ability so openly, fearing it would overwhelm her as it had in the past. Still holding the vegetables, Bubbles hesitated before deciding to follow the sensation. Her enhanced hearing guided her to a corner where she overheard an argument. She recognized the voices immediately, Mandalay and the young boy who had punched Midoriya yesterday, Kota. "You know I couldn't leave you at home alone. I feel much better having you nearby than with a babysitter," Mandalay said, her voice soft but strained. "Yeah. Well, I'd rather be home alone than be with all these stupid wannabe heroes." Kota snapped, his tone full of bitterness. Bubbles froze, the words hitting her like a cold wave. She understood now who those negative emotions had been coming from. The unease she felt grew as she listened, helplessly drawn into the conversation. She heard Mandalay sigh, a note of defeat in her voice. "Kota, I know this is hard for you, but you can't be angry at them. All they want to do is help others." Bubbles took the opportunity to stick her head out a bit. Koda didn't respond immediately but looked away, his small frame rigid with anger. Just so they can end up like them? Why would I want to hang out with idiots who want that? Mandalay's voice softened, and Bubbles could almost hear her trying to calm him. Your parents wouldn't want you to think that way, Koda. If they were still around, they'd want you to. Well, they aren't, okay? Koda snapped again, his voice cracking. He shoved Mandalay's hand away when she reached for his shoulder. They just had to be stupid heroes who went and. Bubbles couldn't bear to hear any more, quickly turned and fled back toward the cooking stations, clutching the vegetables tightly in her hands as her mind raced to process everything. As she was walking towards the cooking station, a number of thoughts were playing in her head. What happened to him? Why is he so angry? Did something happen to his parents? Her breath quickened, the conversation she had just heard reverberating in her mind. She could still feel the raw, aching grief in Koda's words. The pain and confusion in his heart were so palpable, so real. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice Koda silently approaching her. Bubbles, his voice broke through her thoughts like a soft whisper. Oh, Bubbles blinked, startled by his sudden presence, and she quickly straightened herself. Hey Koda. What's up? She asked, trying to sound casual despite the whirlwind inside her. Koda's expression was one of quiet concern. His gaze softened as he looked at her, and he took a small step closer. Are you okay? Where did you go? Blossom's been wondering where the extra vegetables went, and well, you know how she gets. She's already starting to work herself up. Koda's words came out in a slight shudder, knowing full well the trouble that would come if Blossom got too worked up. He'd witnessed her intensity before and knew better than to mess with it. Bubbles chuckled nervously, trying to act normal. I'm fine, Koda, really. I just, went to check on something for a bit. She tried giving him a reassuring smile. Koda didn't seem to buy it, though. His eyes softened in understanding, but his voice remained steady. Are you sure you're okay? You don't look okay. Bubbles sighed, her smile slipping just a little. She could never hide her emotions for long around Koda. He was perceptive, especially now that he was a little more confident than he had been before. She hesitated for a moment before finally relenting. Not really, she admitted softly. I just used my powers, and let's just say, someone isn't doing so well. She didn't elaborate further, but Koda caught on instantly. His expression shifted from concern to understanding, and he nodded at her vigorously. Oh, I see, Koda said quietly. Well, if you want to talk about it later, I'm here. But you don't have to, if you don't want to. Bubbles gave him a grateful smile. Thanks, Koda. I appreciate it. I'll be okay, just not right now. Koda's face brightened with a soft, reassuring smile. Okay. But you know I've got your back if you need anything. Bubbles felt her heart flutter slightly, touched by his kindness. She had always appreciated how thoughtful Koda was, and she could see how much he had grown into himself recently. He wasn't just the quiet, reserved boy anymore. Well, he still was, just not as severe. He looked at the bucket of vegetables in her hands and then back at her with a slightly mischievous smile. Let me carry that for you. You've done enough already. Bubbles blinked in surprise. Oh, you don't have to, Koda. I can handle it. I've got it, Koda insisted with a small but proud grin, stepping forward to take the bucket from her hands. His assertiveness took her off guard, and Bubbles couldn't help but feel a little heat rise to her cheeks. She smiled warmly at him. Okay, you win. Just then, a loud voice rang out from across the camp. Bubbles. Koda. Get those vegetables over here, or else we'll be waiting forever. It was Blossom, and her tone was as sharp as ever. Koda visibly flinched at the sound of Blossom's voice, and Bubbles sighed, a soft laugh escaping her lips. We're coming, she called back, her voice filled with both amusement and a hint of exasperation. Seeing Koda's startled expression, Bubbles placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder and gave him a playful nudge. "Let's get these vegetables to her before Miss Head Chef decides we're on the chopping block," she teased with a grin. Koda's face paled at the thought, and he visibly shuddered. "Why yeah, let's not make her wait any longer." Bubbles chuckled softly as she followed Koda toward the cooking stations, but her mind was still preoccupied with what she had overheard. Koda's words, his anger, everything still lingered in her thoughts, like an unresolved chord that wouldn't let her go. And so, she would need to investigate a little bit later on. After all the preparation, hard work, and unsurprisingly yelling from bakugou, dinner was finally done. The groups were presented with their creations, a large pot of curry, compliments of Blossom and sous chef Kirishima, with added help from her sisters. Rice, courtesy of Momo and her group, was neatly set alongside the curry. Everyone grabbed a bowl and took their places around their respective classes. Before long, the room was filled with the sounds of eager chatter and spoons scraping against bowls as the students devoured their meal with enthusiasm, as if it were their last. "Man, I am so starving right now," Kaminari exclaimed, practically inhaling his first bowl. "I have to say, revelry in the dark sure is hungry work," Tokoyami added, his voice dry and serious, though his own bowl was half empty. Momo, sitting with her classmates, laughed lightly as she took a bite of the curry. "Well, it's not every day we get to cook for ourselves, and after all that training, we deserve it," she said, wiping a small bit of curry from the corner of her mouth. Toru, beside her, was practically glowing with excitement. "Seriously, I don't think I've ever had anything this good at a camp before," she exclaimed, her cheerful voice brightening the table as she continued to pile food onto her plate. "Blossom, you really outdid yourself with this one." The chatter flowed effortlessly around the room, as both Class A and Class B students ate their fill. Some were discussing the day's events, while others were simply enjoying the break in the action. The camp's atmosphere, once tense and filled with the weight of competition, was now filled with relief and the simple joy of a well-earned meal. Everyone had been working hard, but now they could rest and recover, if only for a moment. Aizawa, however, had other plans. As the room gradually quieted and the students settled into a more relaxed mood, Aizawa stood and walked up to the front of the room. His presence was enough to draw everyone's attention immediately. With his usual deadpan expression, he cleared his throat, and the students fell silent. "I'll keep this brief," Aizawa began, his voice carrying over the stillness. "The work you've done today was acceptable. Though I'll admit, I wasn't sure some of you could get through it." His words had the usual bite of a backhanded compliment, and several students winced, knowing his assessment was far from enthusiastic. However, he continued, "This is just the beginning. Don't get too comfortable. There's no time to slack off. Your training is only going to get harder from here." His tone left no room for disagreement. "Yes, sir," came the chorus of responses from the students, their voices a mix of exhaustion and determination. Aizawa gave a curt nod before continuing. "Those of you who have been injured during training should report for healing sessions immediately. Due to Recovery Girl's absence, her assistant, who has been training her own unique healing abilities, will take care of you." He paused, his gaze narrowing slightly as he focused on one particular student. "That would be you, Buttercup Kayama." A murmur spread through the room as the students looked at one another, surprised by the sudden revelation. Some were confused, others intrigued. Buttercup, who had been quietly eating at the table, froze. She glanced over at Blossom and Bubbles, exchanging a brief, uncertain look. It was clear that they hadn't known this was coming either. Buttercup's stomach tightened as she tried to keep her composure. Nizu and Recovery Girl had specifically told her to keep her powers under wraps, and now this? Her face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and frustration. Aizawa continued, unfazed by the ripple of murmurs spreading through the room. "Also, those of you in extra classes with me and Vlad King, follow me after your healing session. That will be all." Without another word, he turned and left the room, his expression as unreadable as ever. The students, still processing the surprise announcement, stared at their food in silence for a few moments. Most of them quickly returned to their meals, though a few still cast sidelong glances at Buttercup. Her quiet table was filled with an awkward tension, broken only by the occasional scrape of cutlery on dishes. Kaminari, Uraraka, Mina, Shiro, and Tenya were the first to break the silence. Each of them fired off questions, their curiosity barely contained. "Wait, what do you mean you have a healing quirk?" Kaminari blurted, his mouth half full as he looked at Buttercup, unable to contain his surprise. "Yeah, why didn't we know about it?" Uraraka added, her tone a mix of curiosity and confusion. "You've been hiding this the whole time?" Mina leaned in eagerly, her wide eyes sparkling. "I mean, this is amazing. Why didn't you tell anyone? You could have helped us all out so many times already." Shiro nodded along. "Seriously, Buttercup, you've been sitting on this power and you didn't think to mention it?" Tenya, ever the logical one, frowned. "Indeed. It seems odd to keep such a useful ability under wraps. What's the reason behind this secrecy?" Izuku, sensing the tension, tried to interject, but before he could say anything, Buttercup slammed her fist down onto the table with a loud thud. The sudden noise shocked everyone into silence. "Enough." Her voice was low, but filled with authority. "It's none of your business, all of you." She glared at the group, and her tone was firm, the finality of it clear. The table fell into complete silence, and Buttercup stood, not waiting for anyone to respond. She took a deep breath, her jaw clenched. "I'm leaving now," she then announced. "And yes, in case you haven't figured it out, the camp nurse," she added, her tone dripping with sweet sarcasm, "is me." She walked off briskly, muttering under her breath about how there better not be any ridiculous outfits involved in her new role as a nurse. The group at the table exchanged uncertain glances. The mood had shifted dramatically, leaving everyone feeling a little awkward, unsure of what to say next. Izuku, Blossom, Bubbles, and even Kirishima scowled in disapproval, though none of them said anything. They could sense Buttercup's frustration, and while they didn't agree with how she handled the situation, they understood why she was upset. The rest of dinner resumed in a more subdued manner, conversations picking up again in quiet murmurs. It wasn't as carefree as before, but after the bombshell revelation, it seemed that curiosity was replaced with an undercurrent of tension. Later in the evening, the forest was quiet, the only sound the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze. Kota Izumi stood at the edge of a cliff, looking out over the vast expanse of trees below. His body was stiff, his face set in a grim expression. The weight of his anger and grief hung heavily in the air around him. He'd sought out this place for peace, for silence, away from the constant reminders of the camp and the teachers. He didn't want to be around the camp, didn't want to be near the so-called heroes who never understood, who never cared. They were just like everyone else, self-absorbed, pretending to be something they weren't. Just like they were, taken by the very thing they had chosen to be heroes. The rustle of a branch snapping behind him broke his concentration. He spun around, heart racing. "Who's there?" he called, voice sharp, immediately on guard. "Is that you, Aunt? Just leave me alone." Before he could finish, a soft voice interrupted him. "No, it's me." Kota froze, his gaze narrowing as he saw the familiar figure of one of the hero students, Bubbles, walking out from the path. She remembered her name due to Mandalay gushing about her and her sister's potential. What a load of CRP it is. She was carrying a covered plate, the smell of food wafting gently toward him. Her cheerful demeanor and bright blue eyes stood in stark contrast to the tension in the air. Bubbles smiled, trying to appear casual. "I brought you some food." For a moment, Kota stared at her, a brief flicker of surprise passing over his face before he quickly masked it with irritation. "What do you want, huh?" Kota snapped, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Shouldn't you be off with the rest of your lame friends, eating and playing at being a hero? Bubbles didn't falter. She simply tilted her head slightly, her eyes softening as she held the plate out to him. I noticed you weren't around for dinner, she said, her voice gentle but firm. I thought you might be hungry. Kota scoffed and turned away, his back to her. Oh, wow. So you guys weren't too busy with your stupid, important conversations to notice I wasn't there, huh? Incredible. His voice was thick with resentment as he crossed his arms over his chest. Thanks or what junk, but I'm not hungry. So you can just buzz off, he added, his tone harsh. He waved dismissively, though his stomach betrayed him with an unmistakable growl. Kota froze, his face flushing a deep shade of red, his embarrassment evident even though he was turned away from her. He stood there for a second, hoping she hadn't noticed, but Bubbles could already feel the shift in the air. She couldn't help but giggle softly. I guess you are hungry then, huh? She teased lightly, stepping forward with a soft smile. Kota didn't reply. He was still trying to cover his embarrassment, his hands clenched into fists as he stared at the ground, refusing to meet her eyes. Bubbles' smile faltered slightly when he didn't respond. Her eyes softened as she took another step closer. I also wanted to talk to you, Kota, she said quietly, her voice carrying a note of genuine concern. See how you're feeling. Before she could finish, Kota whipped around, his face contorted with anger. I told you already. I don't want to hang out with you, or your sisters, or any of you lame hero wannabes. His words were laced with venom, the resentment in his voice almost tangible. He took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling with each exhale. You're all just trying to improve your quirks so you can get famous and make money. It's all so pathetic. He paused, his voice cracking slightly as he muttered under his breath, if quirks never existed they wouldn't have. His words trailed off, and he stopped himself mid-sentence, realizing just what he was about to say. The weight of it hit him like a ton of bricks. Bubbles' heart sank as she recognized the shift in his emotions. She could see the pain flicker in his eyes, and the vulnerability behind the anger. Her voice was gentle as she spoke, careful not to push him too hard. Kota, is this hatred for heroes because of your parents? Kota's eyes shot up at her, his pupils dilated with rage. What do you know? He screamed, his voice raw with fury. What do you know about it? Bubbles flinched at his outburst, but she quickly tried to calm him. I don't know what you've been through, she said softly, her voice steady despite the anger directed at her. I heard what you said to Mandalay before. About how your parents. Kota's eyes widened, the realization hitting him like a slap. His fists clenched as his face turned red with fury. You overheard me, he shouted, his voice full of betrayal. Typical. People like you, always sticking your noses into things that don't concern you. He gritted his teeth, his voice trembling with anger. What, Mandalay asked you to talk to me? To try and convince me that heroes are the best thing in the world? Is that it? No. Bubbles stepped back, her heart aching at the raw emotion he was displaying. No, it's not like that, she said, her voice quiet but insistent. I didn't come here to talk about Mandalay or convince you about heroes. I wanted to talk, to help. I wanted to help you understand your anger, Kota. I saw you on the first day, so quiet, so withdrawn. And then when you hurt my friend I felt all that pain, that anger inside you. My quirk, it lets me sense emotions, and you're hurting, Kota. I don't want your help, he screamed. You don't know what it's like, dealing with heroes and villains, and losing everything. It's all a waste of time. He stopped, his voice growing quieter, filled with a kind of sadness. Losing people like my parents. The words hung in the air, heavy and filled with grief. Bubbles' heart twisted at the pain in his voice. She took a step forward, her eyes filled with empathy. Kota, I may not understand what you're going through, she said softly. But I do know that there are heroes who are fake, sure. But there are good ones out there too. And please don't be so HRD on your parents. They didn't deserve to go like that. Shut up, he yelled, voice rough. Just shut up. Kota stood there, frozen, his fists shaking. The pain in his chest was overwhelming, his emotions at war with each other. Bubbles sighed, feeling the weight of the conversation settle between them. She didn't push him any further. Okay, she said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. I understand. But I just wanted you to know that you're not alone. And there are people who care about you. She placed the plate on the ground with a soft thud and turned to leave. Take care of yourself, Kota, she said softly over her shoulder, her voice filled with gentle concern. Kota stood there, still seething, but his heart ached with confusion. He watched as she walked away, her figure fading into the distance. Without thinking, he kicked the plate, sending it flying across the ground. The curry and food spilled out, mixing with the dirt and rocks. The little chaos did nothing to calm his grief. Heroes SCK, he muttered softly to himself, why did you guys have to leave? As he walked back to the inn, he paid no attention to the tears that dampened his cheeks, allowing himself this moment of vulnerability. Edge of the Wild, Wild Pussycat's private land. The stars were beginning to show themselves as the last rays of sunlight slowly sank behind the horizon. A group of people stood on a cliff overlooking the large forest spanning below. One of them was completely covered in a large black cloak, his face hidden behind a white mask with a few holes in it, completely obscuring his appearance. Another was wearing a male junior high school uniform and an old school helmet and gas mask, with a backpack on his back as well. A large, rather muscular man with semi-long red hair, sunglasses over his eyes, and thick lips. He was dressed in what appeared to be regular, everyday casual wear, but held a large wrapped object in his left hand. A person who looked like an anthropomorphic gecko, with green, scaly skin, purple hair, and red eyes. He wore an outfit very reminiscent of Hero Killer, stains before the serial killer had been captured. He even had a sword made from various knives, sickles, hatchets and other such common blades, all held together by belts and chains. Job, a man straight out of some people's nightmares spoke oddly. He was dressed in what appeared to be a rather extreme KNKY gimp suit, with metal spikes coming from leather straps all over his leather-clad body. His head, barring his mouth, was completely covered, even his eyes, and his arms even seemed pinned to his body beneath the leather bodysuit. The freakiest thing, however, was the fact that his lips were pulled back by an odd device around his head, revealing all of his teeth and making the man slobber on himself. See, the freak understands my language. When are we going to run loose? I'm itching to go. Let's hurry up and move. The large cloaked man said impatiently, as a summer breeze lightly rustled the leaves in the forest. Dobby, part of the group, turned to the cloaked man. Shut your mouth, you crazy BSTRD. We're waiting for the rest of our team, especially the other boys, he said, putting an emphasis on the last part. I was really hoping I wouldn't have to work with those three, the junior high boy in the gas mask groaned, clearly irritated by some members of the group. The red-headed man spoke up, I have to agree with the shrimp over there. He didn't notice the glares being sent his way from behind the gas mask. I'm fine with the girl, but the extra kids? Nah, not for me. Who the hell cares? The large cloaked man demanded, his left hand emerging from beneath his cloak and clenching into a fist. His knuckles cracked loudly with the force. Let's get down there. My BLD's pumping over here. I said, shut up, you whack jobs. Dobby snapped, looking over his shoulder at the others. Not yet, we wait, he then glanced around, spotting one of his teammates unusually quiet. Yo, Toga, he called, gaining her attention. You're being suspiciously quiet, and that's never a good sign when it comes to you. What the hell's going on in that sick head of yours? He asked, eyes narrowing. Himiko Toga, dressed in her usual outfit but now wearing black market-made support gear black mask with vertical cords, a large black scarf with a toothy design, and 6 syringe-like devices attached to her sides in black boxes, each connected to a small pump on her back by a clear plastic tube, looked up, realizing all eyes were on her. She'd been lost in thought, thinking back to a certain event from a few weeks ago. Flashback. In the secret location of the villain's hideout, a bar filled with new faces, Toga among them. "It's almost time, people," Tomura hissed, placing one of his severed hands onto his face. "Soon, our plan will finally unfold." "Ooh, I can't wait for this," the blonde girl in the school outfit giggled, her pointed teeth exposed as she clasped her face. "I'm so ready to do this." "You better keep it together, BLD psycho. You're just as crazy as that musclehead outside," Mustard hissed. Now, let's all play nice," Tomura said, standing up. "You'll all get your chance to let loose. The time is almost here. Once we make this work, not only will we shatter the faith in that stupid UA school, but in heroes in general. That is exactly what we will do when we strike." Dobby rolled his eyes. Yeah, you've said that already. What you didn't mention were the students we'd be targeting, you walking HNDJB, he spat out. Tomura, trying his best not to disintegrate the new member of his team, simmered his temper. "Of course, pardon my forgetfulness," he then motioned for Kurojiri to distribute the photos and the details of their targets. They were given the plan where it was set and what it entailed. Apparently, anyone who stood in their way was considered an obstacle, one that could be killed without hesitation. The villains had no qualms about that. What piqued their curiosity, however, were the faces on the photos they received. Toga eyed the first 2 pictures, both marked for capture alive. One was the primary target of the attack, but the other was a personal request from that strange voice that spoke through the TV, the one seemingly pulling the strings of Shigaraki and the bad red guy. The picture seemed oddly familiar to her. A photo of a green-haired teen, Toga mused that he might look more appealing covered in red. Then to a picture of a blonde, angry-looking boy. Toga quickly lost interest. As she turned the page, 3 more pictures caught her attention, 3 girls, obviously sisters. What made her pause, however, was one of the faces, a certain blonde girl she'd met months ago. Bubbles? End flashback. Toga snapped back to the present, her mind still lingering on that memory. She looked up at Dobby, who was still glaring at her, waiting for an answer. With a sly grin, Toga gave a playful shrug. "Oh, me? I was just thinking about meeting an old and the new friends there." She squealed with excitement, licking her lips. "I wondered if I'll taste them." So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 13. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author ChiWriters on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.